Get started here, folks. If you have a cell phone, please mute it or turn it off, because we'll try not to be disruptive. I'm going to turn mine off, make sure it doesn't go off in the middle of the meeting as well. So Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission agenda, November 10th of 2021. Commission business, approval of October invoices. So commission, and for the record, everybody's here except for Rhett Shirley. Rhett has either not arrived or isn't here this evening. So I need a motion for the approval of the October invoices.
So approved.
Motion by Mr. Stone,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Singer. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, under B, approval of the October 14th, 2021 minutes. Need a motion for approval of the minutes?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Vest,
Second.
second by Dan Smith. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, motion carries. Approval of the November agenda. And I will go, we do have some additional postponements and withdrawals. So, but any approval of the, I need a motion for the approval of the November agenda.
So moved.
By a motion by Steve Smith. Second by DeJuan Garrett. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Under item D, items for postponement or withdrawal. So I'll go through them because we have several. If you're here for the Fairfield Farm subdivision, that one is being continued to next month. So again, December 9th. So if you're here for the Fairfield Farm subdivision, again, that's going to be not heard tonight. That will be continued to next month, December 9th. If you're here for the 1058, so 1058 Paris Pike rezoning, that one's also being postponed. It won't be heard tonight, more than likely December 9th. The other one is the Humphreys property, a final subdivision plat to subdivide 6.9 acres off of, leaving a remainder tract of 9 acres. That one is also being postponed. So if you're here for the Humphreys property, that one will be heard possibly next month, December 9th. And I think that's it. Correct, Joe? Is there any other one that are being postponed or withdrawn? No. Okay, so that's it. So those, if you're here to hear that, we won't be hearing that tonight. Consent agenda, we've got several that are consent eligible, so I'll go right through and starting with under new business, PDP 2021-40, Kentucky Farm Bureau preliminary development plan to construct a 3,864 square foot office located at 101 Trackside Drive. Is anybody here that wants to hear that, who are, say, either against it or even in favor of it, but want to hear it? And we'll do one at a time. This way it'll be easier. Anybody here against that one or in favor and want to hear it? If not, I'll make a motion and need an approval for PDP 2021-40 Kentucky Farm Bureau.
Second.
First, you go first.
I'll
So
second.
Mr. Mifflin first, Mrs. Singer second. All in favor to approve this under consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, approved. For the applicant, come up here and sign with Mr. Perkins, and he'll, we'll take care of that one. Next on the consent agenda is PDP 2021-41, the Crosswind Center, which is a preliminary development plan to construct two buildings, one at 2,458 square feet and the second one at 3,669 square feet for restaurant use located at Crosswind Center Path. Is anybody here against that application? So do you want to hear it? If we want to hear it, then we'll hear that one then. The next one on the consent agenda, is R&L Carriers, PDP 2021-42 R&L Carriers preliminary development plan for an 80-door cross-dock facility, office, vehicle parking, and maintenance garage located south of Cherry Blossom Way Spur, west of the railroad and east of I-75. Is there anybody here that is against that? You do want to hear it? Okay. You were here last month, correct? Okay. All right, so we're going to hear that one as well then. All right. That's what it, for the consent agenda. We did decide at the workshop Monday that we were going to kind of change the order a little bit of what we're going to hear, old business versus new. just because Mr. Pike's going to have a little longer presentation. So we'll move, the one that I wanted to move is the R&L carriers that the young lady in the back wants to hear. PDP, so we'll start with this one, PDP-2021-42, R&L carriers preliminary development plan for an 80. You know, before I get started, we need to have everybody who's going to speak today stand up, and Charlie's going to swear you in, so we want to do that first.
And I'm going to just go ahead and put on the record that I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay. So Charlie, swear
If
me.
you all could raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief? Thank you all.
And also, if you are going to speak, if you haven't already signed in, please sign in at the lectern. And then one last thing, the reason we're having a meeting today is tomorrow's Veterans Day. So if we have any veterans in here, would you please stand up? If we do have any veterans here, even the commissioners, none of you guys are veterans? All right. Well, I just want to thank you, the one veteran here for your service and sacrifices. Thank you very much. All right, Matt, is this you? Okay, so R&L Carriers preliminary development plan for an 80-door cross-dock facility office, vehicle parking and maintenance garage located south of Cherry Blossom Way Spur, west of Railroad, and east of I-75. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. I'm like, where'd he go? Thanks, Chuck. Can't believe you're the only veteran out here.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, as you mentioned, this is a preliminary development plan, and you mentioned that it's an 80-door cross-dock facility. They've got space for offices, and then they've got a variety of parking for both employees and trucks and trailers, and they've got a maintenance garage proposed. The location of the project site is 531 Cherry Blossom Way. I believe that was actually just assigned an address yesterday. The current zoning on the project, if you all remember, is still A1. They came before you all for a zone change hearing last month. You all recommended approval of changing the zone to I1 to City Council. They've not yet taken up that, but I anticipate that they'll take that up shortly within the next couple of meetings. The surrounding zones around the project site are zoned either A1 agricultural, B2 highway commercial, or I2 heavy industrial. And the site's about 44 acres in size. There is one waiver, and I'll talk about that here in just in a couple minutes. This is an aerial image of the project site. You can see I-75 running along the west side of it. The site is there outlined in blue. You've got the railroad on the east side, Cherry Blossom Way going towards exit 129 on I-75 is there on the north side of the property. That skipped ahead several slides on me. I can go back. There we go. This just shows the current zoning. So sort of in that same triangle area, you see the current A1 zoning. You've got the I2 zoning that I mentioned to the east is Toyota. You've got commercial there along the spur road that fronts on Cherry Blossom Way. This is I guess sort of a zoomed out version of the site plan. In the orientation we've got here, north is to the right-hand side of the screen. So you can see they've got the cross-dock facility there sort of on the bottom side of the screen, sort of on the eastern side of the property. The employee parking up north of that. They've got truck parking along the southern part of their paved area and trailer parking on the south side, some truck parking there on the northwest side, and then the maintenance garage is planned for in between. So one of the main thing that's changed since we last saw this at the concept plan stage is they have come forward with plans to realign their entrance. If you remember, initially they were talking about potentially coming off of the end of the spur road, and so now you can see on the plan that they are planning on going and taking their entrance between the hotel that was recently constructed and the natural gas fueling station there on Cherry Blossom Way Spur. This will go to the next slide. There we go. This is a slightly more zoomed in aerial view. So you can see the U-shaped paved area coming off of the spur road That's the natural gas fueling station. This aerial imagery is from, I believe, 2019, so that's why the hotel doesn't show up on that site just to the west of it. But there is that narrow strip that's 50 feet wide, and that's where their entrance is proposed to come out. My understanding is that they are in the process of purchasing that property to the west that is attached to that narrow 50-foot strip. So this is just another view kind of showing in gray. I kind of clipped this out from the plans that you all have a set of, just so we could see. Once it comes off that entrance and comes off that adjoining property, you can see here it'll come. All the vehicles will come basically through the same entrance. The employee parking will split off there to the left, and then the trucks can go through to the docking facility, the parking area, things like that. This shows just a little more detailed version of the entrance and how that'll go. So they've got, you can see it's sort of the bulb on their driveway to help some of the vehicles make turns. You can also see little bits of gray there along the spur road, and that just shows the improvements that they're proposing to make. Some of those were identified as part of their traffic impact study that they did with the zone change in order to help allow some of their vehicles to make the turning movements. Particularly, you see the gray area around the curve where the spur road intersects with Cherry Blossom Way proper. And then they are also proposing some improvements on the spur road itself to hope to bring it to 24 feet in width with some gravel shoulders. This is an excerpt from their landscaping plan. So once again, the orientation is still the same. To the right-hand side of the screen is north. So you can see between this facility and all their driveways and parking areas, they are proposing a fairly robust amount of landscaping to try to shield some of those existing property owners from the uses that would occur on the site. I didn't include a slide for it, but they do have an appropriate screening buffer all the way around the lot to the west that is still zoned A1. We do have a required buffer between industrial zoned property and agriculturally zoned property. And there is one waiver that they're requesting as far as their landscaping and I guess as far as the overall development. And that has to do with an item in our landscaping ordinance related to screening of double frontage lots that have a frontage on an arterial road, in this case I-75, but don't have direct access to it. So we have heard waiver requests on lots of this kind, although none along I-75 before. And I feel like the commission has been pretty reasonable in when to grant waivers and when not to. In this case, I do think it is reasonable to grant a waiver. You can see I've drawn two lines on there, two approximate locations for where the applicant's parking area would start. So both of those lines are in excess of 500 feet from the property line with the interstate. And then as you can see from the image, from the green line there that's on the image, it is still a ways from that property line then to the interstate itself. So I don't think it would have much of a visual impact at this time to grant them the waiver. I think it would be acceptable to not require the landscaping along that extensive boundary. As you can see from their site plan, if I can go back a little bit, their overall site plan, they're not really proposing much along the interstate. So you can see the interstate runs on the left-hand side of the screen, and all their development is sort of on the right-hand side. So those developed areas are over 500 feet from the interstate. And then I also included just a photo. So this is what that site looks like when you look at sort of in the direction of their development from the interstate. So not only is, there are existing trees on the site, there's the elevation change. Looking at the elevation of the interstate and the elevation of their, proposed parking lot, it's pretty close to the same. And so there is sort of like, I guess the view from the interstate, you see this sort of mound where the earth comes up, and then where they're going to build it will be at the same level of the interstate. So it'll kind of sink down with almost like a natural rise in between them. If they were ever to come back before you and propose additional development out toward the interstate, at that time I think it would be appropriate for us to require a screening buffer. But the distance and the natural terrain, I think it's prudent to grant a waiver. So I am recommending approval. I am recommending approval with the 12 conditions that are listed in the staff report. I can go over in the waiver that was requested. I can go over a couple of those. Condition 1, I just wanted to clarify, this whole approval, if you all approve their application, is contingent upon them sort of finalizing the zone change with city council and annexation. Condition 6 and 7 have to do with stormwater and the dry run study and, complying with the requirements and guidelines in that. Condition 8 reminds the applicant that there is a sunset clause, so the preliminary approval is good for a period of 2 years. They've got 2 years basically to get a final development plan approved. Condition 10 and 11 sort of deal with environmental type issues and making sure that, drains and fueling areas, are funneled to the sanitary sewer, that anything that might, flush potential fuel or other contaminants have appropriate filtering areas. And then condition 12 is sort of a reminder for them to continue to work with Columbia Gas, which they have been, to make sure that there's not any damage to existing natural gas lines in the area. There are some substantial ones that run along the boundaries of this property. And that's all that I had.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt by the commission? All right, thank you. We'll hear from the applicant. Somebody here? Oh, there you go.
Stan Richards with R&L Carriers, just letting you know, appreciate the opportunity, and we're here for questions if you have any.
Any questions for Mr. Richards by the commission?
The one thing I might mention is, if you've looked at the road out there, I don't know if you have any plans to improve the existing road. They did repave it this year, but it's, I seriously doubt that it's going to stand up to a whole lot of truck traffic over. I don't know whose responsibility that would be, because I know they've been going back and forth between whether it belongs to the county or belongs to the state. I don't know if that's been resolved or not.
Oh, we have some people who are having trouble hearing,
Oh, I'm sorry.
just in general, so for everybody.
For everybody?
Can they turn the mics up
Yeah.
a little bit?
Yeah, we can tell Jay.
Okay, maybe see if you could turn it up. All right, thank you. Any questions other than that? And Matt, can you answer that, the condition of the road and whose responsibility it is?
Who's responsible for the road?
You want to get up to microphone? Maybe, then maybe you can answer Stephen's question.
I mean, my understanding is that the spur road is still under state ownership, but I may not be the best one to answer that if things have changed since then.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
For a long time, it was never touched, and then in addition to that, they didn't even mow the right of way along it, so
Yeah.
the fell on the people on the road to maintain it.
Mr. Perkins?
I've got
Oh, yeah, I was going to have them come up after Matt spoke and Mr. Richards spoke.
I've got feedback about the road from here.
Oh, sure, come on up. Again, and anytime you speak for the record, please state your name and address. This is being recorded, so when we get minutes, we'll make sure we get everybody's name
This is
correct.
Roy Cornett. You're right, the spur road's been a no man's land for years. J.R. Brandenburg, the county road foreman, I was talking to him about that one, and also Delissa Drive out here on the west side of town. And they're in the process of talking to the state, between the county and the state, about swapping some out.
Good.
And I think J.R. told me that the state was in a blacktop spur road. It sounds like they've done that, what you said, Stephen.
They did blacktop, yeah.
Okay, and anticipating the county to take it over, so.
Yeah.
That doesn't, you're right, that doesn't mean the heavy truck traffic's gonna be saved.
Right.
But that is in the wheelhouse to be swapped out.
Thank you, Mr. Cornett. Anybody else want to speak, ma'am? I think you raised your hand and wanted to hear. Did you would like to speak? Come on up, and again, for the record, state your name and address.
Carlene Sharp, 525 Cherry Blossom Spur. I noticed the pictures all look fine from 75, but Nobody mentioned about my little house sitting down there, and how close is that gonna be to my house?
It'd be,
And there's also a spring that's next to my property, which has not been maintained, and now it's beginning to back up. It kind of backs up on the backside of my yard. Are they going to try to fix that so it'll drain properly, or just leave it and just, whoever owns the property kind of needs to look after it? And do they plan to use the railroad for any transportation to receive or ship out products? It's kind of noisy there now, but I can't imagine adding more if they plan to use the railroad. And what kind of buffer would be next to my house?
Any other questions? And I'll
Nope.
bring up Mr. Richards and hopefully have him answer most of that, or his engineer, if his engineer, I think, is with him.
Where's the spring located?
It's probably about 25 foot from my driveway. You can't really see it for all the trees that's grown up. It fed a pond for years, but since it was never maintained to drain properly, then the railroad went down there and cleaned out some trees and pushed the trees across the road in the ditch. So it's, over years, it's getting kind of bad, and it's backing up, and it kind of stains in water over there.
can't remember if there's,
Okay, we'll hopefully get your questions answered. Thank you. Is it Mr. Lovinelli? Did I pronounce that right? Ivanelli. Sorry, I thought that
No
was
worries.
the L. Ivanelli.
Happens all the time. Joe Ivanelli with Manhart Consulting. Address is 700 Springer Drive, Lombard, Illinois. So I can answer the questions here. First one was, had a question about the proximity to the home. The employee parking lot's about 150 feet away from the property line, and any trucking activity is at least 250 feet away, so there's a pretty decent buffer. And we are proposing a lot of landscaping on the northern portion of the property to screen all activity as much as possible. The other question related to the drainage. We're working with the county and engineering staff to carefully grade everything to improve the drainage conditions on site, make sure we're not backing up water anywhere, and maintaining existing drainage patterns as much as possible. There will not be any access to the railroad, no connection there. And I think the final one was a buffer, which we talked about the landscaping. There's opportunities to even berm up a little bit if needed. So I believe that answers the questions. Any further questions from the Planning Commission?
Any questions for Mr. Ivanelli? Okay. And I did forget to mention, Mrs. Singer did recuse herself from this application. I should have made mention of that at the very beginning as this application was heard. So thank you.
No problem.
Hopefully that answered all of your questions. Anybody else in here like to speak on behalf or against this application, or any other questions by the commission? Comments, thoughts? Then otherwise I'll entertain a motion.
I move that PDP 2021-42 with the 12 conditions of approval and the one waiver be approved, please.
So we've got a motion by Mr. Mifflin,
I'll second it.
second by Stephen Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. You can come up to Mr. Perkins and sign the documentation. And then, Elise, would you get Mrs. Singer? She's probably out in the hallway. And we'll get started with this next one. Okay, next on the agenda is, yes, we'll go right back now to the top, under old business, ZMA 2021-34 Leaf and Barrel zoning map amendment to change the zoning district from A1 to B1 located at 1442 Delaplane Road. This is a public hearing, so we'll open it up as a public hearing. Keep looking at that clock, but no one's turned it back.
All right.
I don't know, I may send them a bill. I need the money. And for the record, Mary Singer's rejoined us. It's all yours, man.
All right, thank you. This is a zoning map amendment to change the zone on a 3.44 acre piece of property from A1 agricultural to B1, which is our neighborhood commercial zoning district. The project site is at 1442 Delaplane Road. The surrounding properties are zoned either A1 or B1. The concept plan doesn't show the addition of any new buildings to the site. The concept plan does show a parking lot, which may or may not require work in the future, should the zone change be approved. Access to the site can be from either Delaplane Road or Oxford Village Drive. This is an aerial image of the site. Many of you might be more familiar with it as the site of the old Oxford School. It's been used as a lumber, like mill or lumber yard since, I believe, the 50s. The site also has a house on it, which was the old FFA shop back around the time that this was still a school. This is a copy of the zoning map showing the current zoning of the property and the surrounding properties. So 1442 Delaplane Road shows up there, sort of in the middle on the map. It is, like I mentioned, zoned agricultural. As you can see, much of the property in that area is also zoned agricultural. There is some property that's zoned B1 there at the corner of the intersection of Delaplane Road and Cynthiana Road. This is a zoomed-in, I guess, view of the concept plan. Like I mentioned before, the applicant isn't proposing any new buildings at this time. They don't anticipate adding any new buildings. They're also requesting that they not be required to connect to public sewer at this time, and that they just use the septic system that's on site. Probably it would require a health department inspection with the change in use, should you all grant that approval. So the main, I guess, feature that they show with the concept plan is that, you know, they can fit in adequate parking, and that they can show that, you know, it is the small building that used to be the FFA building or FFA shop that's being proposed for the main change in the use on the site. My understanding is that they don't intend to change the use of the old school building, although they have been in the process of cleaning up the site. Let's see. When we consider zoning map amendments, as always, we are guided by state statute, section 100, KRS 100.213, and I'm going to go over this as I always do, but it describes the findings that are necessary in your deliberations on whether or not you recommend approval or denial of zone changes to the appropriate legislative bodies. And in order to grant approval, you all have to find that it's in agreement, that the proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the current comprehensive plan. If you cannot find that that is the case, you can then consider whether the existing zoning on the property is inappropriate and whether the current proposed zoning is appropriate. And if you don't find that that is the case, then you would consider whether or not there have been major changes of an economic, physical, or social nature in the area that were not anticipated by the comprehensive plan that have substantially altered the character of the area. So when we consider that, we start looking at the different elements of the comprehensive plan. And this map here shows us a snapshot of the future land use map for this area. So you can see the intersection there of Delaplane Road and Cynthiana Road and Delaplane Road and Old Oxford Drive. And you can see there's a sort of a thin purple line that sort of, I guess, curves through the area. And that's the urban service boundary as it exists through this area. So the urban service boundary in this area follows the Lanes Run watershed. And so that's sort of why it has the, I guess, sort of an unusual look to it. It doesn't exactly follow property lines, but it has been that way for a long time. So you can see the project site in question here is mostly identified in that sort of reddish orange color. And that is a commercial future land use as designated by our comprehensive plan. The sort of yellowish color that much of the surrounding property to the south and east are designated as is a rural type use, in this case a rural residential, although it would certainly allow for any agricultural type uses. This is a green print map that our GIS department put together. Usually I ask them to put these together for zone changes, as you guys have noticed over the last several applications. But mostly when we look at this map, we're looking at whether or not there's any, I guess, farmland that's protected or any environmentally sensitive areas on a site. So when we look at this map here, you know, there's no property on the project site there outlined that shows up as being, you know, prime farmland or farmland of statewide importance. Some of the gray areas indicate, you know, there may be a little bit of steep slopes in certain areas on the site, but, you know, we would sort of use more of a, we would defer on some of those issues until the development plan and we see what the actual contours on the site are. So as other parts of my analysis of the comprehensive plan, you know, I go through the goals and objectives as I always do, and I try to pull out all of the goals and objectives that may be applicable to this site. And so part of that is looking at property that is on the National Register of Historic Places, and this site does show up in the Oxford Historic District. This is a map from that application that was made to create the historic district. You'll notice that it is stamped from 1979, and the property in question shows up on the far left-hand side of the screen. There's two buildings numbered 23 and 24. 23 being the school site itself, and it is identified as a contributing structure to the historic district, and the blue site 24 is the FFA building. It is indicated as being a non-contributing structure in the historic district. This was more, you know, maybe just for me, but I did include the photos that were in the application of the site. So this is the school building circa, I'm guessing 1979, when the application was made, and this is the house on site from the same application and same time period. So let me go back a couple of slides. So as I went through the goals and objectives, you know, I found that objective from Community Forum 1.1 calls for the management of the urban service boundary and city annexation. And this property is inside the urban service boundary. If there is going to be growth and development, you know, we do prefer for that to be within the urban service boundary. It helps our communities to prevent sprawl. It helps our community to prevent excessive costs for things like emergency services by having, you know, various large developments sort of sprinkled throughout the county. Kind of helps to concentrate them around our urban centers where we can provide those services more efficiently. Objective CF 1.4 encourages the preservation of prime farmland. I already went through the group with the green print map. You know, although the property is zoned agricultural, it is not prime farmland. It has not been used as agricultural property in decades, if not more than a century. Objective CF 3.3 calls for existing structures to be preserved, and this application proposes to do that. They propose to continue to use the old school building. They propose to repurpose the FFA building on site. And we do prefer to see that, especially given that these are buildings located within a historic district. We have other goals that strive to protect historic properties, but the one I wanted to discuss the most comes up on page 3 of the staff report, where objective HO 2.3, and we've discussed this one before on other applications, but it says, quote, explore opportunities to combine development efforts and infill with historic preservation and place priority on preserving existing residential structures of historic value and retaining neighborhood character. So I always think that one's really important when we deal with properties that are in or around historic neighborhoods or areas. In this case, you know, this property is located within a historic district, so we would look, if if you all were to approve a zone change for the site, we would look for the applicant to continue to maintain the historic character of the Oxford community. So even if, these buildings were to be repurposed, we would look for things like lighting and signage to, not detract from the historic character of the area. Let's see. We also, I'm not going to go over all of them, but there are several other objectives that, to maybe a little bit lesser degree, do support the application. Overall, I do find that the comprehensive plan supports the proposed zoning map amendment. And therefore, I do find that the zoning map amendment is in agreement with the comprehensive plan and the findings that are necessary under KRS 100.213. So I do recommend that the Planning Commission recommend approval to fiscal court with the 5 conditions that are listed in the staff report. I'm going to go over a couple of these just so we have some clarification on what it is that I'm recommending. Condition 1 is standard. We include that with all applications. They must continue to comply with the zoning ordinance and the subdivision and development regulations. Condition 2 being that the applicant should or shall request annexation if either they get sewer access to the project site or if any of the adjoining properties or properties on this side of Delaplane Road are annexed into the city. Condition 3 being that, if the applicant does propose construction of a parking lot or if construction of a parking lot is necessary if the existing pavement isn't adequate, that does require a development plan be submitted to our office for approval. We also would look for the outdoor storage that exists on the site to be brought into compliance as far as screening, reducing the visibility from roadways and adjoining properties. Condition 4, pertaining to the lighting and signage that I mentioned before, we would look for the property to, not detract from the historic character of the historic district that it lies in. And condition 5, clarifying that should a more substantial redevelopment of the project site occur, at that point we would require sanitary sewer be brought to all habitable structures. I'm willing to recommend that they not be required to connect to public sewer at this time, just because they are proposing to simply reuse the existing buildings on site. But if additional development or redevelopment of the site was to occur later that involved demolition or the construction of new buildings with a larger intensity of use, we would look for the site to connect to public sewer at that time. And that's all that I had.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody have any questions for Matt? Mr. Summers? Yes.
The requirements or recommendations in terms of the conditions relative to signage and lighting and those meeting the sort of historic district idea, are those details a part of the final development plan that would be submitted, or how is that sort of?
I mean, normally I would make conditions like that part of the development plan. In this case, I'm not 100% sure if a development plan will be necessary. The applicant has indicated that there is already a paved surface in the area where they're proposing a parking lot. And so if that is the case, then there may not be any construction necessary for them to, or I guess that would require a development plan. So I wanted to make sure that we were sort of clear of our expectations at this point.
So how do you ensure that happens?
No, that's a good question.
And what would that signage look like?
My concern for as far as signage has mostly to do with whether signs are internally illuminated or not. There are several residences that are in the area. We wouldn't want signage in the area to become a nuisance to neighbors, keep people up at night or shine in windows, things like that. So I think if there was to be signage that was going to be lighted, I would expect it to maybe be externally illuminated, so like a light shining on a sign rather than the shine, the sign itself, sending light out. As far as lighting, I would imagine, I don't actually know, and perhaps Joe can help me, but I don't know if they're adding like lighting to the parking lot. I don't know if that would require a development plan itself.
No, it'd be required to shield the lights, so it'd be something we'd have to work with them when they, as long as they know what the expectations are, we'd have to tell them, what's required.
So can the conditions include specifics in terms of the height sign, the material it's made out of, no internal illumination of it, or?
I suppose that it could be more specific. Okay. Yeah.
And
What was
Matt-
that, what'd you say?
If they do a freestanding sign, it would have to be a monument-style sign rather than a pole-style sign. So it would be a maximum height of 8 feet, 50 square feet, I believe is the maximum area.
Matt, generally speaking, when we get an application, we usually get more than a picture with a few boxes on it. Do we have engineer drawings of what this is gonna look like, how tall?
I mean, not-
Cosmetically speaking, is it gonna be
Not
brick?
not for this one, just because they're not proposing any
Because it's
construction.
just a public hearing of the zone change.
Well, they're not proposing any construction. They're just going to reuse the existing houses and whatnot.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, you said it would have to be connected to the sewer if they expanded it. Is there bathroom facilities there now, and is that septic, or?
Yeah. Yeah, there is a bathroom in the I guess the house building right now. It was used as a house for
Okay, is it a
for a while.
septic tank, or?
Yeah, and that would have, it would have to be inspected with the change in use. Yeah, it would be expensive to connect the site to sewer as is. I think the closest sewer is over at BCTC.
BCTC, yeah.
And the sign ordinance only applies to city, right?
No, there is
Now,
a
is there a
sign
sign
ordinance
ordinance
for
for
the
the county?
county as well, yes.
I'm not sure that it has any historic guidelines, though, does it, in terms of his
No,
signage
this,
near historic property?
this site, while it's in a national register
Mm-hmm.
acknowledged historic district, it is not in a historic district that's designated by local ordinance.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Ms. Singer, any other questions for Mr. Summers? Otherwise, we'll bring the applicant up to answer any questions, and then we'll open it up to people who would like to speak for it or against it. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Would the applicant come on up and speak?
Can I ask just real quick, can you all hear better now? Or? I'm wondering if it would help if the microphone was pulled down a little bit towards the podium when you're speaking, maybe? And speaking directly into it, that might help.
Can you not hear us, or can you not hear the speaker?
Well, I have a big mouth.
Either or.
Everybody can hear me, right?
Elise, did you check with Jay to see if we can turn the volume up?
They maxed it out.
Really?
It's just the nature of the room and technology in the room. There's not a lot of speakers placed in the room. It's hard to.
So with everybody, just try to speak up so we hear everybody, and then, of course, please keep there's some conversations going on that's also muffling the speakers, and so please keep the private conversations to a minimum as well, and we'll try to speak up loudly.
Good evening to all of you all. I think I recognize everybody here. My name is Zach Cato. I'm an attorney at Billings Law Firm. We represent the applicant in this matter. Here, representing the applicant, we have Larry Ledbetter and Charles Graves. Some of you may know him as Pokey, I understand. But they're here tonight on behalf of the applicant. Matt did a great job summarizing it. We're in agreement with the staff report. There are just a few highlights I want to hit. I'm going to be brief. There are, as has been discussed, there are no new buildings or no new improvements proposed. The operation is going to be limited. The existing lumber operation will continue as it has the Oxford School building for 60-plus years, I think maybe even longer. Nothing's going to change there. The only new activity would be at that smaller, the old, what was called the FFA building. It was built as an FFA project way back when. It would be there. It's 1,400 square feet. It's very limited size. There's going to be very limited activity. There's going to only be a certain number of people that could even be there at one time. So there's not going to be a bunch of new traffic or a bunch of coming and going. It's going to be a very small operation. The location of the property is kind of nestled in between across, I think it's Cynthiana Road, is BCTCS, And then back in the other direction, you've kind of got some neighborhoods and some churches. It's kind of an appropriate transition of intensity between those two as far as land use goes. And then lastly, that this application is context sensitive in that we're not expanding the buildings, we're not building them higher, we're using the buildings that are there and providing a new use, diversifying some of the economic opportunities in Scott County, the new offering that's not currently there. So it's kind of a win-win-win in that regard, that we're preserving the history while offering something new. So just so everybody knows, the larger building down on the right side is the old Oxford School. Nothing's going to change over there. And then that smaller building to the left side is where this operation will be exclusively. The zone change, Matt went over this, what the standard is. Basically, our application is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Also, what I'll add is that the current zoning for the lumber operation, it's been agricultural for years and years and years and years. Well, there's really not an agricultural use that's like lumber milling and like retail sale of lumber products, which is what's going on there. So this zone change will actually reduce the non-conforming use in compliance with Kentucky law and our public policy to eliminate and reduce non-conforming uses over time. So this will also help with that as well. Just to hit the highlights of the comprehensive plan, this is an existing center of activity with BCTCS and the business park. It's historically been a center of activity in the National Register application back in 1979. There were 4 commercial buildings and multiple commercial operations. Even then, a grocery, I think an antique store. There's several churches in the neighborhood, and then residential. So this has always been kind of a blended neighborhood. We're not taking any farmland away from Scott County. It's not been used as farmland for who knows how long, a very, very, very long time. So that's not going to change. We are preserving the existing structures. As we said, they are not technically in a historic district. They're not subject to any restrictions on what we can do because they're on the National Register of Historic Places. But even if they were, we're not proposing any changes to them. So nothing would be implicated under the zoning ordinance as far as having to meet any special standards. Lastly, this is a small-scale development, like I said. It's not even a development, it's a different use. So we're adding a new mix of goods and services on a very small scale, something that Scott County doesn't currently have that people will drive to Lexington and to Nicholasville to do, which is a small cigar lounge and bourbon experience. And that's something new that hasn't been there before like this. And then lastly, that by itself contributes to diversifying the economy. It's a brand new thing. So these are pictures just to show the cleanup, progress of the cleanup that was mentioned earlier. You saw there's a lot of stuff on the aerial, a lot of stuff laying around. The property's in the process of being cleaned up. I'm just showing you this just to show that that's ongoing. That the benefit of this process is already that the property looks better than it did. So this is just part of it that we're going through as part of this process. And this will all have to be done and the new use screened off from this before they can start operations. I think the plan that would be now is if this zone change is approved and adopted, that the applicants would meet on site to discuss the parking issues, to discuss the lighting issues, the screening issues, make sure staff's fine with it. If it requires a development plan, they'll do the development plan and go through it, but to make sure that staff is satisfied everything's done correctly. And as far as the lighting concerns go and the signs concerns go, I spoke with them just now. They'll coordinate with staff on that to make sure the signs are appropriate and meet the requirements, that the lighting's appropriate for the neighborhood. That's not an issue. They want it to be context sensitive already, so they'll work with staff to make sure that that's done correctly. So in conclusion, I'm going to reserve the rest of my time for any rebuttal that may come up, but the applicant's in agreement with the staff's report with the findings, with the proposed conditions, and we ask that you recommend approval of that for the reasons stated in the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Attorney Cato at this point? Go ahead.
Oh, you want to go? You can go first, man.
It's, the city of Georgetown has a non-smoking ordinance, and so they're in the county now, so they're all right with that. But what if a few years down the road, they get annexed in? Would they be able to be grandfathered in, or would they have to cease operations, or what would happen if that?
That's a legal question, so I'm not.
Well, you're a lawyer.
I've not.
That's why I was
The
asking
problem is,
you.
what I think is not the end of the discussion. So what I would say is that that's a question for then. If it's not grandfathered in, that's going to be a problem for them, and they understand that. But our process is going to be to do this now, and if that becomes a problem in the future, then they'll have to address that. That would have to be taken up then.
Do you know what the?
I was going to
ordinance
ask
handles it?
our attorney.
I have his answer, if that's right. I understand, Mr. Chairman, that there are such ordinances where that actually isn't treated the same as others, because that's a business where people actually go to smoke cigars. So it's different, and it's actually exempted to some degree. I do not know details at all. I am not aware that ours has that. And clearly, that's not going to be something in the really near future. If it comes up, it'll have to be addressed. But since that is the purpose, as opposed to going there to eat or to, shop or whatever, it is treated differently. And I would anticipate that's probably what would result ultimately.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mrs. Singer?
Since it's an historic property, are there any ADA requirements that you need to make some adjustments for in the building in terms of
So
access?
the property will have to be brought up to code before they can get a permit to operate. So any changes like that have to be made will be done through building inspection, the permitting process. There's a lot of that stuff they're going to have to do because of the age of as far as people they got to check with, sign-offs they got to get. So it would be addressed at that time, and if it's required, then they would have to do it then.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think, Mr. Smith, you had a question?
I have one question just on is there a plan as far as there are 12 proposed parking spaces, and if there happen to be 15 or 16 people there, is there overflow parking that?
So the school property used to be, after it was done being used as a school, it was used as a kind of a bus garage or bus parking for a number of years.
Yeah.
And there's still a big asphalt parking lot out there that I understand is in pretty good shape that may need a little bit of attention, but there's a big chunk of it that can still be used for parking. I think the plan would be to make that usable as it is, which may have more parking than what's shown there, but if they're going to have to do a new parking lot, that would require a development plan and coming back before you. But this is like the first step in that process of figuring out if we need to get there or not with the parking specifics.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Okay, again, this is a public hearing, so if you're here to speak for it or against it, come on up to the lectern. Again, state your name and address and comments. What? Speak loudly. Yes, and speak loudly. Thank you. Anybody? Oh, there we go.
Good evening. My name's Larry Simpson. I live at 2675 Oxford Village Lane. The proposed property sits kind of a 10 o'clock position from my house, so I could hit it with a rock. My wife and I have lived there for 26 years, so we've seen Oxford Village when it was US 62. Sandy Shue used to do woodworking with the chainsaw across from my house, so I've seen it all through the years. First of all, you can call it a lounge, you can call it a club, it's a bar. It is what it is. B1 zoning, and they've already addressed this with the minimum lot size and the sewer. That was one of my issues also. The initial application was for 1.44 acres, which I presume was just for the home, and then they took it up to 3.44 acres. I've got a question why that was expanded an additional 2 acres if it's not going to be encompassed into part of this application for the business. The other thing also is B1, by definition, retail sales from neighborhood consumption. If you look around our neighborhood, there's very few people who are planning on consuming the product there. I mean, that's just an unscientific poll, which you'll probably hear more tonight. Like I said, I wonder why they went from 1.44 to 3.44. I've got a question about the old house there, and boy, those are old pictures. What is the building occupant capacity going to be in there? Because you're dealing with alcohol and fire. What's your capacity going to be in the building? Is there any outdoor seating planned? Are they going to try to copy what Country Boy is doing across the road? Are we going to have to deal with the noise? Are we going to have to deal with bands? Are we going to have to deal with everything else that goes with it? Will that violate the noise ordinance, light ordinance, everything else? Because, I mean, we live out there, and that's the way we like it. Also, if the business goes under, what happens to that zoning? Well, now you've got 3.44 acres in B1. What's next, a gas station? To me, this is a dangerous precedent, because if you zone A1, immediately B1, I've got a property next door to me I can buy tomorrow. Can I get it zoned B1? Can I start a bar? I mean, it's the same thing. Oxford Village Lane is a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone. We get people to run through there, especially at shift change, 60, 70 miles an hour. It's dangerous now. We've got families that walk. We've got kids that play in the front yard. My mailboxes have been torn down. My fence has been destroyed. At the end of Delaplane, there's a stop sign where you come out there to hit Oxford Village Lane. I can't tell you how many times I've almost been hit there by people running that stop sign already. I hope people don't get impaired, but guess what? If somebody gets impaired, they run the stop sign, we have other issues to contend with. There is no direct access from US 62 to this property. That's another issue. They have to travel along Delaplane Road or Oxford Village, so you have to travel on these little narrow roads to get there. And you say you're going to have people coming from Lexington, Nicholasville, wherever. If you're going to have 12 parking spaces, you're probably going to have more than 12 people showing up if they're driving all the way from Nicholasville. The other issue I have also, the LLC that's behind this was originally formed in West Virginia. Their offices got moved to Simpsonville. They were administratively dissolved by the Secretary of State because they didn't even bother filing a report. Within a week, this property was purchased. They filed for reinstatement. Everything all happened at once. It was like bam, 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 get it done. To me, I don't think this is a good fit for the neighborhood. I really don't. If Mr. Ledbetter and Mr. Graves want to have friends over at their house, smoke some cigars, drink a little bourbon, that is their prerogative. They can do it at their house, but I don't want it that close to mine. So I'm asking you to unconditionally deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Does anybody else want to speak?
Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I live at 2740 Oxford Village Lane. My wife and I moved there about 13 years ago, I guess, 8 years ago. Time flies, doesn't it? And I think the nature of the community is such that a lot of people move out there for the peace and the quiet and for the historical nature aspect of the community. I'm not here to speak for or against this thing. I'm here to express three concerns that I have. One concern, I think has already been expressed, is the activities within this building. Are there any plans, or in the future, if the thing's going pretty well, are they going to maybe build a deck outside, maybe have some dining, maybe have some entertainment outside, and then you're going to start seeing a real change to the complexion of the community itself, I believe. So I want to know what kind of plans there are in that respect. And like I say, it doesn't have to be in the initial one, but it could be things are going well, let's expand it. I know we saw that happen at Country Boy, and I know there have been some problems up there with some of, in the older days with some of the noise. The second thing is lighting, and I believe that, we've got a lot of people will address that, and I don't foresee that it is a huge problem. I just think it has to be, done in a a way that would fit into the community. And my third concern, is in sewage. And it's kind of, I think the issue was brought up about the number of people that are going to be using this facility. I know that facility hasn't been used for a long time, and I guess it has a septic system. If this thing goes and it starts to increase, then you're going to see a pretty substantial increase in the use of that septic system. Now, I was, for 3 years, Deputy Secretary of the Environmental Protection Cabinet in this state. And I know that a lot of the problems we had, particularly in eastern Kentucky, and you'd be surprised in other parts of the state, was with straight pipes, and where the sewage and the effluent runs basically directly into the groundwater and the water supply. A non-functioning septic system is pretty much the same thing as a straight pipe. I think we probably have some septic problems in Oxford. A lot of us have probably been waiting for a while to see whether we're ever going to get sewer out there or not. But those are the three concerns I have, and like I say, it's not necessarily for or against the project. It's just that if we want to keep that neighborhood the way it is, and the great things about that neighborhood and the things that make it, so such a good place to move and to have kids, is that I think we need to look at those three things: the outside noise, particularly, the sewage situation, and any situation with the lighting. And I assume that you will do that and do your due diligence and help keep our Oxford community very close to what it is now.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Next person who'd like to speak? Anybody else going to speak?
My name is Lee Craig. I live at 2473 Cynthiana Road. Our property is behind and wraps around the property that is requesting rezoning. We have a whole lot of concerns. Lighting's one. Right now, Delaplane is a very dark road, so for them to put a 12-spot parking lot out there, you would hope that it would be lit, especially if people are drinking, but that's going to cause problems with people directly across the street and with us, because that's going to be in my bedroom window. We also have problems with the noise out there. When you're out in the country, things are amplified. And like I said, our property is directly behind this, and slamming car doors, if people talking loudly in a parking lot. He keeps emphasizing small, small, small. Well, he didn't mention capacity, didn't mention hours of operation. So we don't know how, are we looking at loud crowds till 1 o'clock in the morning every Friday, Saturday night? What are we looking at there? Sewage is going to be an issue. They mentioned the inclines. Well, all the inclines lead down into our property all the way around. So if they do have a sewage issue and they have an overflow, it's all going to end up in our yard, every bit of it. With a business comes a dumpster. I don't know if anybody's ever smelled what a bar dumpster smells like. Couldn't get any worse. Nasty, brings rats too. So we're looking at that. And then how does this affect my property value? Because it does abut my property. And talking about smoking and drinking, backs up to woods and backs up to a lumber yard. What are the issues with fire? What's he going to do to prevent that? So I'm not the only one, And the future business thing also really concerns me, because I really do not want a speedway in my backyard. So thank you.
Thank you. The next person who'd like to speak?
My name is Carlene Perkins. I live at 2625 Oxford Village Lane. My husband, Danny Perkins, and I bought the property 20 years ago. And I'm in favor of the zoning change. I think it's a good business that we need. My husband, if you knew my husband, he smoked cigars all of his life. He started smoking when he was 16. He died in 2019. For years, he told me, Scott County needs a good cigar store with a humidor where you can go buy a good cigar and a smoking lounge where you can go and smoke. He knew a lot of people that smoked cigars, but maybe they can't smoke in their home, and they need a cigar lounge where they can go. My husband would either have to order his cigars. He said you just buy cheap cigars at a grocery store or a service station or whatever. My husband, he'd have to order his cigars from Florida, or we would go to Swab's. It's up in Southland Drive. It was a nice cigar store, and it had a lounge. I recall the last time I was there with him, we was in the humidor, and Mike Price, he was vice president of the Toyota plant here. He came in there, and he got him a cigar. Of course, my husband was buying him by the box, but Mike got one cigar, and he went out there and sat in the lounge part to smoke his cigar. And I remember when I left, I told my husband, I didn't know Mike smoked. And he said, that's what I've been trying to say, that there's a lot of people that don't smoke on a regular basis, but they enjoy a nice cigar, and they want to buy a good cigar. You can't get a good cigar anywhere in Scott County. There is no good cigar store with the humidor that sells the good cigars. You have to go to Fayette County, or that's where he would go. So he made his point to me, and I know that if he was still living, he would greatly approve of this. He always said this would be a good business for Scott County. It's something that's not in Scott County, and it's needed in Scott County. I want to make another point. I went to school in Oxford. I was in the first grade there. In the second grade, and then we came back after Christmas. In January '56, we moved to Eastern. So I'm old enough to remember all the businesses that used to be in Oxford. Some of the buildings are still there, and well, there's one that was a garage that's fell down, but the grocery store is still there. Mr. and Ms. Eubank had a business down at the four-way stop. Used to be a lot of businesses in Oxford. I've heard the comment that this is a farming residential community and we don't need any businesses. I disagree with that. I think businesses coming back to Oxford would be good. So it is my hope that this business that is needed in Scott County, my husband knew a lot of people that smoke cigars, and they needed a place to go because they didn't smoke at their home. My husband did. I knew that when I married him 50 years ago, he could smoke it in the house. So it is my hope that you approve the zoning change requested by Mr. Graves and the other gentleman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Perkins. Anybody else want to speak in favor or against? Come on up here and again state your name and address again.
Larry Simpson, 2675 Oxford Village Lane. In reference to selling cigars, there is no retail license required in the state of Kentucky to sell tobacco products. For what it's worth, Mr. Ledbetter has already been selling quality cigars through Facebook and other things, and they can pick them up at that location. That's been all over Facebook. Come out to Delaplane and pick them up. So nobody's saying don't sell them. We're just saying don't have the alcohol and the tobacco there. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to speak?
Brad Green, 2609 Oxford Village Lane, Georgetown, Kentucky. Known Pokey all my life. Worked beside him, stripped beside him. Think a lot of him and his family. I really do. I've grown up, if you don't know me, my property, my home, my family's home, where my grandparents lived. Where I set up housekeeping is about 300 feet away. The property's about 150 feet away. I was raised there. Spent many days in the lumber yard and stopping for a soda. And, they always had an old refrigerator in the back. Sometimes even helping Ernest out if he was cutting some lumber and putting some stuff in the old school. And it was a great time to be in Oxford. I'll not deny that the school hasn't been in business all my life. It meets those qualifications that's put forth. And throughout that same time, the building he wants to make into a bar has been a residence when it was not vacant. It is a fact this property is inside of the comprehensive plan. We see that, we all see that. However, it is not inside the city limits at this time, and sewer is not available, direct hook at this time. And I'd like to brag on Matt. Was that the young man that did the plan? He did a great job. You know, the stipulations that he put in there to protect Oxford and what he thought about, answered a lot of questions that came to my mind immediately, and he put a lot of things in there, and that was good. I really appreciate him looking out for our community, that we want it to look nice and still hold in the values of our community and the history of it. And I do like the quiet out there. However, I would like to ask this board to consider not approving this for B1, at least until proper utilities are in place to support it. The city and growth is coming to us. We cannot stop, nor should we stop the wheels of progress. However, you can steer the wheels where they need to go without running in the ditch. And I believe a bar in Oxford is running in the ditch. If the board sees fit to grant this amendment to B1, I would ask for my neighbors and my neighborhood that you not grant the waiver for septic and require the property to be connected to the public sewer as part of conditional approval. Thank you all very much for your time and listening to my name.
Thank you. Next person to speak.
Mr. Chairman, if I can say one thing, that's my stepson. Don't hold that against him, please.
Oh, I will hold that against you, Charlie.
I was going to ask if you're going to recuse yourself.
Hold it against him.
Good evening. Well, this is high, for sure.
You can pull it down.
I'm going to. My name is Kimberly Lynn, and I live at 2663 Oxford Village Lane. The old Oxford School is in my front yard. It's been in my front yard for 24 years. I have lived in that house. My house is on the National Historic Registry, just like his school. He is the third generation of the Graves family to run a business of a lumberyard out of that school. And he's been a fine neighbor. I've never held anything against Pokey. Have you ever been to Oxford, any of you? Have you ever seen the old Oxford School? It's a mess, there's no doubt. And I thank the Planning Commission for suggesting cleaning it up to try to get your zoning change planned, because Pokey has been busy, and he's done a great job cleaning up, I have to say. But we have to talk about something here. Their attorney has painted this wonderful picture of this bourbon and barrel bar. But he didn't tell you. He said, oh, it's very close to BCTC and the park, the industry park or business park across Highway 62. This school's not across Highway 62. This school is in our neighborhood. I have children that ride bicycles, that roller skate in front of our house. Now, they can't do it during shift change at Toyota because traffic is ridiculous. We have joggers. We have a bicycle team from Lexington that comes through our little street in Oxford. We have a family that has moved in at the end of Oxford that they're training for a marathon, and they have a 1-year-old baby, and you will see them jogging with their stroller in front of my house. Oxford is not an out-of-the-way place where people don't know each other. I know every one of my neighbors, including Carlene and Jeffrey. We're neighbors. This is a community. I watch out for Carlene's property when she goes out of town. I farm at the Craig's house in front of my yard. They have a plot of land. They let me farm there. I do a community farm, give vegetables away. I raise dairy goats. I have Nigerian dwarfs across the street from the old Oxford School. So it is an agricultural community. Every person here has a garden or they raise livestock. Every person here is family. We look out for each other. Pokey can tell you. I watch out for his property. When we have kids breaking in, wanting to do their ghost hunting or whatever, Pokey's on my speed dial. Pokey, there's people at the lumber yard. Excuse me, I'm nervous. He says, okay, Kim, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Call the sheriff. We have a great neighborly relationship. But this is it. It's a neighborhood. There is a house that is not 25 yards from the front door of this proposed bar that has 3 children. It belongs to Wally Parrish. His grandchildren live there. He cannot be here tonight because he's out of state. His grandchildren are under the age of 10. Their driveway is not 10 yards from the front door of this building where they ride their tricycles and they have a swing set. This is not the place for a bar. It is not. We are a close-knit community. We all respect each other. We look out for each other. This B1 plan says that the service must support the community or provide a good for the community. There is no one sitting here that's going to smoke a cigar with Pokey or drink bourbon at that place. Nobody is. Because it's a community, it's a neighborhood. If they're going to drink or smoke, they're going to do it at home. They're not going to go out and endanger somebody else's family. We're not going to bring drunk drivers in. This is such a concern of mine. I have dedicated my life to Scott County. I've been here for 24 years. I chose my home because it was a historic home in a rural community of farmland. The Oxford Village area that everybody's talking about, we've lost business and we need business. Back in the 40s and 50s, it did have business. And it had more sprawled out farmland. Neighbors were much farther apart. Things are now sold. An example, the Craig's home, which faces 62. When I bought my house, it was just rolling pastures. It was just fields right next to the lumberyard, empty field. One of the reasons I bought it, because it was out in the country. I was away from the hustle and bustle of everything else. I worked at Toyota. I wanted peace and solitude when I got off work. I found it. I found Oxford historic. I love my home. I love our little community. Now, time has changed. Lots of progress has come. Toyota has brought a lot of people here. We now have 5-acre tracts and 1-acre plots. This is not rolling, it's not agriculture like massive, 100 acres of corn or tobacco or anything. It's a neighborhood. We bake muffins. Bring muffins to your neighbor. We farm together. We have gardens together. We look out for each other's property. I pet set. We farm set and take care of the sheep for the Smiths at the end of Oxford and Newtown Pike when they go out of town. Everybody looks out for each other. Regina just bought the house across the street from us a year ago? 2 years ago. We watch her house when she's gone and take care of her dogs. She bought it because it's a rural community with no traffic, no loud noises. We don't have to deal. They painted this picture that we're part of what's over at the business park, but we're not. This is a small country community. So small. The reason there's not businesses now is because the businesses have all been turned into homes. The little Miss Carrie, the business that she has in front of her log cabin in Oxford is her art studio where she paints and finds peace and solitude. We don't want to bring the traffic and drunk drivers where we have kids riding bicycles, people with carriages and their babies in them. We want to keep Oxford as a neighborhood community, and I am adamantly, as much as I love Pokey, against a bar and a cigar lounge going in the FFA building. We need to maintain the historic status of Oxford. It was added to the National Registry in 1979. They applied for that in 1970, and it took them to 1979 to add this to the National Historic Registry. It's under the administration of the parks, the National Park Service. It's not a place that you want to bring in businesses that sell alcohol. It's not that. It's a neighborhood. We are a family. People wave at each other. They stop, talk to you when you're outside. It's not like going down the street and there's sirens and you see somebody over there on the sidewalk. It's not like that. People stop at your house. How you doing? Catch up. This is not the place for a bourbon barrel lounge and cigar bar. And I have a question of all of you. do you, when people apply for zoning change, do you do background checks? Do you investigate their history? Because this is our homes we're talking about. Every one of us have invested our lives and our finances into Scott County. We pay taxes. Sadly, Pokey doesn't live there. Mr. Ledbetter does not live in our neighborhood. But they're willing to come and change the quality of our lives to further their pocketbooks. You have to consider we are all voters, and we all dedicated ourselves to Scott County because Oxford was a peaceful haven. On a Sunday afternoon, on a Saturday evening, you can come out and sit in my yard, and it's just like a Norman Rockwell painting. People walking their dogs, people with their little baby carriages, people on their bicycles. It's not a hustle, bustle, busy industry area. Pokey does a good business with his lumber yard. I see people over there buying lumber from him all the time. It's great that he finally cleaned it up. He's the third generation, and it's finally getting cleaned up. That's fabulous. But have you checked into their backgrounds? Have you looked at other places? Have you looked at Pokey's farm? Have you researched Mr. Ledbetter? Did he leave West Virginia? Why did he do this business in Simpsonville and now it's gone? What's going on here? These are not people that live in our neighborhood. We're there 24/7. Pokey's there during business hours. And speaking of business hours, they're not open for business yet, correct? They don't have their whatever to sell. But if you go to the Leaf and Barrel Bourbon page under Post, right now it says we have, I'm going to put my glasses on, I'm not as young as I look. Westport DO sample packs are ready. You can get them between the hours of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, 9 noon on Saturday at 1442 Delaplane Road in Georgetown. See Pokey in the mill, comma, those school, and then the costs and how to pay for it. They're doing business right now. And nothing has been resolved. Matt did a great job. I love the way that he painted our community as needs business, it needs industrial. No, it doesn't. Oxford is now a residential area. People have 5-acre homes, 1-acre homes. There's no room for this to happen in our area. The concept plan or future plan showed that the Craig's house is part of new industry or something. Hope y'all are prepared to pay, because that's an expensive home right there. That's an expensive home. My best friend lived in that house. And Lee came to our yard sale when we had a yard sale. And she said, I love this house. If you ever sell this house, I got to have it. And when Connie had to move back to West Virginia, she called Lee, and they sold their house to Lee. And Connie was my best friend, but I have great neighbors in the Craigs. I have great neighbors in the Greens. My little girls have helped Ms. Green out. Brad's a good neighbor. Love having him down there. Carrie and Bruce down in Oxford. We have such a mix of people. We have old people, elderly. I'm one of those. We have new families. There are 2 families right down the street that have little children that are under the age of, I want to say, 10. The parish kids, which are right across from the bar, they're all under 10, and there's 3 of them. This is our homes. This is what we've invested in. This is what we've spent our money in Scott County on. We've been here. We vote. We keep our livelihood in Scott County. I'm retired now. My husband's retired. We could go anywhere we want. In 24 years, I could live anywhere I wanted. And I chose to be here. I chose to be on Oxford Village Road because it was a Norman Rockwell painting. It was all America right there. No bars, no crazy traffic, nothing. We are just a beautiful community, and we're growing. We have new families and new blood, new homes. This is not the same Oxford when Pokey's grandpa bought that school. There were no houses around him. My house was there. The little house across the street wasn't there. Regina's house wasn't there. The Craig's house wasn't there. It's grown up. There are new families there and new homes. It's not. It is agricultural still, and we would like to see it kept that way. We don't want a business of a bar in our neighborhood. I don't want my kids on streets where people have been drinking and driving. I'm dead set against this, and I hope that you will consider what we've said here tonight as the community of Oxford.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else want to speak? Anybody else?
Back.
Come on up, ma'am.
My name's Carrie Williams. I live at 2740 Oxford Village Lane at the corner of 922 and Oxford Village. And I would just like to invite you all to come out if you've never been to Oxford and see what it's like. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in favor or against? Okay. Mr. Cato, would you like to come up and answer pretty much all, hopefully most, if not all, the questions or concerns?
The first thing I would like to say is we're here for a zone change. We kind of got off the path of a zone change a while ago, it sounds like, but the question is whether or not this application satisfies the comprehensive plan. That comes from the General Assembly, KRS 100.213, and that's all that we're here to decide tonight. We're not here to decide what's going to happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road. We're here on this one question, which is, does this application meet the comprehensive plan goals and objectives? And the answer is yes. Staff's told you that. I've repeated that. You've had supporters get up and say that. So I want to point that out. The next thing I think I need to address is, to the extent there's been comments about what are their motivations, who are these people, what I can tell you is they care enough about this neighborhood that they're investing money and time and effort, and I'm not working for free either. They like this neighborhood. They're investing money there because they like it and they care about it. So to the extent there's questions about if you're doing a background check, well, did anybody that bought anything out there pass a background check? No. These are people that are here. They're answering questions. They've been forthcoming, and if anybody wants to talk to them, they can stop by and talk to them anytime. There's been very little discussion except with a few people. So if anybody has questions, they're free to stop by anytime they want to. There's been a lot of discussion about, is it going to be like Country Boy? No. It's going to be more like Jake's Cigar Bar, if you know what that is in Nicholasville. Self-contained, mostly indoors, if not completely indoors. Like, if you didn't know what it was, you were out in the parking lot, you wouldn't know if it was a tanning salon or a restaurant or what it was. It's just like in a strip mall, and there it is. That's more what we're talking about. We're not talking about a big sprawling operation that's going to be all hours of the night. We've already addressed the noise and the light. There are ordinances about noise. We've already said we'll talk with the lighting. It's got to go through planning. That's all going to be done. That's going to be done to protect the neighborhood and protect the neighbors. That's going to be done. You've also heard two different things, which I don't see, I don't understand, but you've heard on one hand that this is a road that you can ride your bike on and have strollers and stuff, but you also heard it's a death trap because you got traffic going up down at 60 or 70 miles an hour. This is a small operation. It is 1,400 square feet. The capacity of it is going to be limited, very limited to whatever that is. The fire marshals will determine that, and that's all there's going to be. So we're talking about, let's say at most, 20 cars there at a time, at the most, on a road that's got people going back and forth from Toyota and the business park and the college and different things. It's a very small impact, and it sounds like there's already traffic issues out there. It's not going to get any worse than it is now. It is what it is. There's already a situation out there. Lastly, I mean, you've heard an acknowledgement already, but Oxford's already changed. It's already changed. You've heard stories from people that lived here and have seen it. It's already changed. It's always had commercial uses. It's always been a center of activity. What it is has changed over time. this is not going to change the neighborhood. There's not going to be bad behavior, and the reason we know that is because we have laws against bad behavior out there that the police will be happy to enforce if there's anything going out there that shouldn't be. A lot of these concerns we understand. We know it's a change. We know that you come out there, you buy your property, you come out there for a certain reason, you have your own thoughts and feelings about it. The fact of the matter is a decision was made at least in 2016, if not earlier, to recommend this for commercial use under the future land use map. That decision has been made for years. This application is compliant with that. It's looking towards the future, towards the comprehensive plan that's been adopted here. That's the law in Scott County. And because it satisfies it, the limited question before you is the zone change appropriate? The answer can only be yes. And the other issues will be addressed through planning, through, if there's issues that come up, through police, through code enforcement, whatever it is. So that's all I have to say at this time. Happy to answer any questions that may
Any
have come up.
questions by the commission of Attorney Cato?
Yes. The hours of operation, I know that was questioned. What are the planned hours of operation?
Well, that's not been set yet because we don't know if we're going to have the zone change, but
Well, assuming the zone change was approved, what you're proposing, what's the hours of,
Have you all
what are the
discussed
hours of
that?
operation?
More than likely, it's gonna be Monday through Friday.
Yeah, would you come up, just because it's recorded, and we got to get it on audio so they can put it in the minutes, please. So state your name as well.
My name's Larry Ledbetter, and I live at 102 Shuttle Drive in Georgetown. Tentatively, we're thinking probably noon to 9 on Monday through Thursday, and probably till 11 on Friday and Saturday. And I'd like to answer one other question. We do have a sales and use license and a tobacco license required by the state, so.
What about the question regarding outdoor seating or entertainment? Is any of that planned currently?
We have discussed possibly adding a small deck on the back to allow people that might want to go outside. Maybe if a guy would like to bring his wife and she doesn't want to sit inside while he smokes, so she could have a glass of wine and sit outside with him while he smokes a cigar.
that's not being proposed now, though. And if they were going to do that, they're going to have to come back and go through the planning steps to get that approved. And it may require development plans. There'll be new structures out, there would be a new structure. So that would be a long-term plan that would go back through the planning process, and they would have people would have an opportunity to speak up on that at that time when there's a specific plan, if that ever happens.
What about the septic issues that were brought up? The
That's going to
concerns?
have to be re-inspected, and it'll have to pass whatever inspections the health department has. They'll have to do that. I assume there'll be some tests that they run, but it would have to pass the test any other system passes, so it'll be up to code.
And just one more thing. I know, lots of times, particularly with smaller communities like that, meetings and things ahead of time to talk about it. Have you all had any meetings directly with the Oxford community to talk about it?
The applicants have talked to different.
Sorry.
My name's Charles Graves. I run Graves Lumber Yard. I'm there from 9 to 5 during the week, 9 till noon on Saturday. I have spoken to one person of my neighbors that stopped, and I just happened to catch him. He was walking by, and I spoke to him today, and I noticed that he did not show up tonight. So a lot of this could have been settled a long time ago.
Thank you, Mr. Graves.
I'll say that I sent letters out to homeowners that we thought may have an issue and received no response. There was one.
Hang on. Ma'am, you gotta wait. You can't have yelling and shouting. We'll have you all up at the microphone to speak, I promise. We can't do yelling and shouting. And sir, I seen you in the back. I'll get you, I promise.
So the other thing is there was one person that hired an attorney who I've spoken to, and their issues were resolved. That was the parishes. They hired an attorney that I talked to yesterday. I've not heard from anybody else. So these things we're hearing tonight, I assume there would be opposition. My name's been on the application. I've not heard from anybody other than that.
Any other questions for Mr. Cato? And then we'll have people come up and speak. Any other questions, comments for Mr. Cato?
You looking at me?
I'm
Not
looking
right
at
now.
everybody. Okay, thank you, Mr. Cato. Sir, if you want to come up and again, state your name and address, and if anybody else wants to come up.
I'm not sure I'll need a microphone or not. My name's Lonnie Craig, 2473 Cynthiana Road.
I'm the one that his property backs up to. If you want to pull that picture back up, I'll show you why I'm concerned. To show this big L or 7, what do you want to, my property and his. When he's talking about possibly putting a deck, possibly down the road, I understand, that affects me. My wife has cancer. She has a hard time sleeping already. Kim lives across the road. Mr. Gray's property's right there. It's not been cleaned up in years. All of a sudden, it's cleaning up. Why is that? I've seen you laughing all night, Mr. Graves. That's fine. I'm cool with that. All right? I have a big problem with this. I bought that land because it was a peaceful neighborhood. They have alcoholics. I love a cold beers like anybody else. Drink a bourbon's fine. When you start getting a bunch of bourbon, cigar smokers, all sitting around having a good time, it gets loud. I've been around those places. I know. I'm sure some of you on this same board know. You've been in those same parts. Okay? That's not the one I want. I want the one that shows the orange. If you don't mind. Yeah. 2473. That's mine. Okay? Back on up. Back on up. Please.
Right there?
Yeah. The big 7 shape. That's my property. Okay? His property comes up to the corner of the 2 roads. Now you're talking about, the lawyer here was talking about how no worry about people driving fast or anything. What about the trucks that sit on that road right there that's delivering stuff to his property, to his sawmill, the tractor trailers? I've seen tractor trailers on that road running from Cherry Blossom to the back. Now you're going to put another business in there, and you can't deny it. I mowed last week 2 tractor trailers waiting to unload stuff or pick stuff up. I'm not sure which one it was. They're sitting on that road. So you want to bring more traffic in there, where are you going to park them at? I can tell you right now that property's going to cost you a bunch of money to get it. This is ridiculous. I can't even figure out how in the world you're even thinking about it. This is a community of people that get along fine. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Anybody else, I think, wanted to speak?
Regina, go ahead. Okay, so I didn't stand up. I wasn't intending on speaking.
Well, then raise your hand and Charlie will swear you in.
Swear me in, Charlie.
Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to give is the truth, to the best of your information and belief?
Yes, I do. Regina McCoy, 2692 Oxford Village Lane. I am the next piece of property in the orange. I looked for 2 years to find property in Scott County. My daughter's here, my granddaughter's here. I wanted to be with them. I'm retired. And I looked for 2 years, seriously. I have a horse. I have 2 hens. There are so many places in Scott County where you can't have a horse, and heaven forbid you can't have any hens. So walked into this house, got through the front couple of rooms, went out on the back porch or out up the deck, and saw a paddock with 2 horses in it. And I looked at my realtor, I said, find out if I can bring my chickens. So, I mean, this is what I want to be my forever home. I don't want to go anywhere. It is a community, it's a neighborhood. It's not a business area. Across the road, you can go over there, and that is, you know, commercial, and that's what it's intended to be. But not on our side, where we have families. I mean, I have a 3-year-old granddaughter. It's just, it's not a good fit for those of us who call it home and intend on it being home forever.
Thank you, Mrs. McCoy. Anybody else want to speak?
Kimberly Lynn, 2663 Oxford Village Lane. I just want to touch on something that the attorney stated about how dangerous our roads are and how crazy the traffic is. Do a traffic study. Come out and do a traffic study and see. Shift change time at Toyota is the only traffic on our street, the only traffic. So I appeal to this board, please come out and do that. Come out and look at the lumberyard, look at the FFA building, look at the little kids that live across the street from that. This is not the time. They've met all of their requirements for a zoning change, but I gotta ask. You have a room full of taxpayers, a room full of people who've committed to Scott County. What do we have to do to protect our homes where we've decided to spend the rest of our lives? To protect us from an alcoholic bar or drivers or businesses like this encroaching on our neighborhood. What do we have to do? You can take two people who have nothing to do with our community, do not live there. Pokey has a great lumber business, and all of a sudden he wants to put in a bar. Why does he have to have a bar? Why? I don't understand it. All this talk about bring business to Oxford. We don't need business because we are now a residential area. Come out and look. I don't understand how they've met all their requirements and you all can even consider this as a possibility of changing all of these lives and the quality of our lives in Scott County to accommodate two people to make money. It all comes down to that tax base and that bottom dollar, doesn't it? You better look at the constituents and the people who vote in this county and live here and love it versus the people who are trying to make money off of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak?
Lee Craig, 2473 Cynthiana Road. I know y'all want to go home. I do too. I just want to address something that the attorney said. He said, we are here for a zoning change request, period. That's all you're supposed to consider. Well, according to the zoning change request, they are supposed to be connected to sewer, and they're trying to bypass that. So I don't want you to forget that. They're trying to get around that loophole. Second of all, he brought up, it's not that kind of business. We're not going to have those kind of problems with drunks, blah, blah, blah. You can't control how people behave when they're drinking, period. And as far as that's for the law to enforce, Kim called the sheriff's office out yesterday. They never showed up. I called the sheriff's office out a month ago. They never showed up. Now, I'm not dogging our sheriff's department, but they're not out there. They're here in town. And I don't think they really see us as a big issue. Plus, they're shorthanded like everybody else's police department and sheriff's department. So if something does happen out there and there's a big drunken brawl out in the parking lot or whatever, you can't count on the sheriff's department to show up anytime quick. I'm telling you that right now. So you need to consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Oh, come on up. Have you sworn in, or did you just show up? Oh, you did swear in?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so please raise your right hand and.
You swear affirm the statement you're about to give with the truth to the best of your information and belief.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My name is Dana Davis, and I am the daughter of the woman who for 17 years owned 2720 Oxford Village Lane. She left us last month, and I inherited her horses and cats and dogs and farm and moved my life from Texas to here to be a steward of that land in her honor. And it's beautiful land, and I can't imagine anything finer, closer to, and easy things to get to, like Target, like Walmart and such. But the idea of it being residential is what has made me want to stay and come here and be a part of this community, because it is the quietest, most beautiful spot I can imagine. And I would hate for that to change because of a bar opening up or a pub opening up on our streets. I worry about the traffic, I worry about the animals getting hit, I worry about a lot. And we only have traffic during those shift changes, and it's nice and quiet, and I'd like it to stay that way.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Anyone else like to speak? If not, we're going to close the public hearing. No one else like to speak? I will close the public hearing, and then, commissioners, do we have any more conversation, questions, thoughts?
Maybe I need to pass my questions on to you so
I've got a comment, more
Yes, sir,
question.
Mr. Vest.
Mr. Graves, you've heard all the people tonight. I would like to hear your response and not the lawyers on their concerns and what they feel, because you know all of them. You've been out there your whole life.
Our primary business goal is to sell cigars. We want a place where
Can you
if you
pull the
want to come.
microphone up a little bit?
It's too short now.
You're too tall.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
We want a place where someone, since there basically is no place for someone to go smoke, especially cigars, to be able to come out, sit down. If you want a bourbon, you have a bourbon. And that's it. One of us will probably be running it most of the time. We're not, if somebody has too many, we're not either not going to let them leave or we're not going to serve them. There's training for that. We have to be trained for that. Like I said, if people had come talk to me instead of getting all stirred up about all this stuff that's not even planned, we could have solved a whole lot of trouble. But again, our primary business plan is to sell cigars. The bourbon is simply an add-on. As we've already said before, it's a small location. This will give me the impetus and the income to finish cleaning up the property. There was some question about me just buying it. Well, my sister inherited it, but I had control of it. That wasn't very fair to her, so I bought it from her. That's why I own the property now. It was circumstance that Mr. Ledbetter and I met at approximately the same time. As far as the cleanup, I wanted to clean it up for years. I wasn't in a position to do it for one reason or another. I had a couple of guys that wanted firewood. I retained their services to finish cleaning up the whole property. It will take a while. It didn't get that way in a short period of time. So, and with bad weather coming on, they can't get in there because that ground's wet. But we will continue the cleanup, and I will continue the school building. I will continue to repair it. Actually, I'm planning to do some roof work and stuff next year that'll make it. So, you know, we're not looking, the bar is not what this is. This is a place to go smoke a cigar. If you want a bourbon, that's fine. So, does anybody else have
Thank you,
any
Mr.
questions?
Graves. Well, hang on, we're gonna, well, I know, Mr. Graves, go ahead and I'll bring you up so we can kind of keep, well, you gotta walk up to the microphone, keep
Well, I
you.
was going to be real polite back
Yeah.
when you asked the question. Was I was going to ask is, why did the sign go up on the side of the building before you ever talked to anybody about it? Leaf and bourbon. Leaf and barrel, I'm sorry. Leaf and barrel was on the side of the building before it was ever brought to you all. Can we do this?
The timing of the signage, I'm not real sure. I think we had already applied. This is a month behind. We were continued last month because the survey was not what I thought it was. That was the addition of the property. The school building and the house were in the same tract, and I did not realize that because the deed was written from 1927, and the trees and the rocks had been moved, so I couldn't tell where the lines were. We had a tenant Festival of the Horse. That's why the sign was made. And we were in the process. It hadn't been public yet, and that's why the sign was made.
Thank you. because the public hearing's been closed, it's really for the commission to talk. You all have had the opportunity to come up, so we're not going to have any more shouting back and forth. Questions by the commission for
The
Mr.
statement regarding they would have to come back with construction of any outside venue being added a deck, that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, they would need a development plan if it's under,
Joe, do you want to go up to the microphone, sir?
yes, any new structures would require a development plan. A deck would be a minor development plan, I believe, so it would just be staff review. It wouldn't come back to
It wouldn't come back to the commission.
commission, but I suppose you could make that condition for any outside construction. You could add that, I suppose. I'd get Charlie's opinion on that.
You got an opinion, Charlie?
Considering the concerns, that's probably not inappropriate. On the other hand, 20 square foot deck is probably not something we want brought back here. So, yeah, there needs to be some, discretion involved in it, I'm sure.
I know we talked a little bit about the standards for the signage and lighting with the store. Somebody mentioned that it's just governed by the National Park Service, because it's on the historic registry, it's not?
It is. The National Register is a designation that protects it from any federal projects. So if there's any projects that receive federal funding, then they have to consider that designation, either the structures or the district. If they're in the National Register, then they have to consider the impacts on that.
Okay.
But that's only for federal funded projects.
I did wonder if we were to consider approving it and add any conditions relative to that. I haven't just Googled, I used the Google while we were here to pull this up, so I have no idea if this has any relevance, because it has a lot of detail. It's 252 pages, because it's, of course, a federal document.
Yeah.
The National Park Service has some standards relative to building sites and things like that that are connected to historic properties. I don't know if there are any guidelines in there that could govern it, that might give some guidance. But I would feel much more comfortable if there were some details regarding what the requirements were relative to making sure the historic structure, the historic property was maintained. But you'll have lighting and signage, right?
The signage will be on the building.
The signage, but you'll have it there, right? In front of it,
Well, no, there's no room in front of it, there's only 8 feet from the road and a half.
so the signage, the current sign that's there, or that they were?
The sign he was talking about is just a little banner that's we put up on the side of the house.
But you'll have lighting added, I would assume, for the parking lot?
Any signage with lighting would be on the below the house towards 62. And it would just be like a billboard type thing, appropriate size, with some lighting, with all.
What about lights in the parking lot for the parking? Well, it was one of the staff conditions, that's why I'm bringing it up, but we didn't have any details around it,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, there are standards, Secretary of Interior standards for historic, construction in historic districts. So there are some standards out there, but, they're usually applied by an architectural review board, within a historic, local historic district. So,
If we don't have.
there are standards, but, who would do the evaluation? I mean,
Right.
and who would apply them is a
Because it doesn't have to
open
come back,
question.
of course, with the development plan, right?
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
This is probably something for discussion or comment or question, and Charlie, I'm going to reach out to you, probably, or direct this towards you. There is a concern by myself of if you put a patio out back, I don't smoke cigars, never have, never will. But my wife adamantly hates the smell of them. She doesn't even like just getting wind of it. So if you put a patio out back, husband drags his wife out there to have a glass of wine and.
Or the wife drags her husband out.
Yeah,
there.
maybe
She
she's
just wants
smoking a cigar. She just wants some fresh air. I respect the residents here. How do you, Charlie, you know, you're gonna have some noise, maybe some laughter, you know, you're out having a cigar and a drink. I can understand that, that's something that can be controlled to a degree. How can we've had other establishments here in Georgetown that do have outside seating, and then we've had some neighbors that were concerned about it, and then you do have bands out there. Country Boy has bands, and they don't have a lot of residents too close to Country Boy. You do have some residents that are close by. How can we, because I don't think you have any current plans to have bands out back.
And you're comparing, you keep comparing us to country.
Well, I'm just thinking long term is if you know, if you're successful.
They don't have room.
I haven't drove out there, but I don't, how big can your patio be out back? I don't know. Is it really just small? Okay. I don't know, Mr. Graves, yeah. The what does? Oh, is that part of the 3.4 acres?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm thinking just worst case scenario. So I don't know how big a patio could be out back, have bands. Because worse, I know these people would hate to have loud music in their backyard. That was just, okay.
And we're looking at maybe 15 or 20 people a day.
Right. I'm asking a question, that's all. Okay. And if there's no room for a big patio and a big band, then I won't even ask.
But in addition, the only time those kinds of concerns can be addressed by one of our boards, it's the Board of Adjustment, and it's on a conditional use permit, because that's a use that's not otherwise permitted. And so they are given wide discretion to put conditions on it to make sure that if they are allowed there, it will be for the benefit, and you rule out hours of, and
Gotcha.
other things and noises and whatnot.
So I just want to make sure we're well covered, and it sounds
Yeah, but that really doesn't apply on a
Okay.
zone change.
Sounds good. All right, thank you. Other comments, questions by the commission?
So, I've got a question for Joe or Matt. So the lumberyard, all of these years has been operating under a non-compliant zone. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it predates zoning, so it's been operating as a non-conforming use.
Grandfather's in.
Right.
Almost
So all we-
great-grandfather.
So if we were to approve this tonight, approve the zone change, that would also make the lumberyard compliant. Is that correct?
Well, not really, because a lumberyard wouldn't be, it wouldn't be a use permitted in B1. So if it was coming in today into a B1 zone, we wouldn't allow a lumberyard in B1. So the lumberyard would still be, it would become more compliant, but it'd still be
It would still be a
non-conforming.
non-conforming use.
It'd still be non-conforming.
Yeah. Because otherwise, that would be an industrial use in any of our categories.
All right.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions for Joe or the applicant?
I have a question or comment that probably could go to Pokey or Mr. Ledbetter. It seems the issue is probably not so much the cigars as it is the alcohol. And can a cigar bar make it on its own without alcohol, or would it have to? Does it have to have alcohol in it?
That's really a condition we couldn't put on this.
Oh, I know that, but I'm just trying to come up with
A solution.
yeah. I mean, if
And I'm
people really
certainly-
are looking for a place to smoke a cigar, can they do it without having a drink? I don't know. It seems like in a community with
I was gonna say, if
kids
one of you
and-
want to come up and answer the question in the microphone, that'd be great. Getting your exercise today.
A little parched. Larry Ledbetter, back up again. The simple answer to your question is yes. I mean, people can buy cigars and smoke them, and the idea of adding the alcohol is an enhancement to the whole situation. People that, my neighbor will come over to my house and we'll sit on the back deck and we'll have a bourbon and smoke a couple cigars, and he goes back home, and it's the same type of thing. most of your cigar bars or cigar lounges, if they do not sell alcohol, they are permitted to bring it on site, which creates its own problems because then there's no control. By us having the appropriate alcohol license, then we now have control over what's consumed on our property. So the simple answer is yes, but we're trying to allow people to have an experience that will enhance their cigar smoking experience. And make note, what my partner said, what Charles said about us being a cigar lounge first that's my goal. That's the reason my wife and I moved to Georgetown. And to answer another question, my wife lived here for 15 years. We got married in 2009, and she drugged me back here because she wanted to come back to Georgetown. So that's why I moved from West Virginia, if you didn't get that in your background check. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir.
Let me ask, before you sit down, and I don't have any clue.
Sure.
You all mentioned a cigar lounge in Lexington, Nicholasville, but is it Schwab's?
Schwab's is in Lexington.
In
Yes, sir.
Lexington? Now, I remember when they were down on Main Street and out at Fayette Mall, and they were strictly a cigar pipe store.
Schwab's is, yes.
Are they still that way, or do they sell bourbon too?
They don't, no.
It's
But
strictly a
Schwab's
cigar.
is, they've been in business for years and years and years and years. I compare us more to what Jake's is in Nicholasville.
I have no idea that.
And, but again, it's that people can come out, smoke a cigar, watch a Kentucky football game, have a glass of bourbon, have them a beer or whatever, and then, smoke their cigar and head on their way home. It's not a place designed for people to come and drink. That's not what I want. I've never wanted that, and I explained that to Pokey on day one.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments, questions?
I certainly don't want to seem like I want to kick the can down the road. At the same time, it does seem like lots of times when you have the two sides sort of get together and talk through it, there sometimes are opportunities to address some of the issues. I think some of them have been addressed through, as an example, the septic system would obviously have to go through a review process and be approved before it could be put into use. The deck, the outdoor space would have to go through Board of Adjustment or some other conditional use permit process.
Development plan here, not Board of Adjustment.
Okay, development plan here. So I think some of those concerns are addressed already through the things that are in place. I don't know that we can address sitting here the details such as the historic signs or lighting or those sorts of things to make everybody feel comfortable. I don't know if there is an opportunity to consider continuance to give everybody an opportunity to come together. I don't know that there could be any kumbaya, but I'm not opposed to the business. At the same time, I understand the concerns of the community in terms of making sure they preserve the historic nature of their home. So,
Ms. Singer, I know what we've done in the past, if we've had a community that's come out against something, and an attorney who says that the invitations or letters were sent to have a meeting and there was no meeting, we have continued an application to the following month to give them an opportunity. Public hearing's closed, so we're not going to open it back up for comments or concerns. But that we could potentially, as a commission, make the motion to continue to give them the opportunity to meet with the neighbors and maybe do the Kumbaya dance and song. And then we can come back next month. I mean, that's our decision as a commission.
Okay.
So you could make that motion if you want.
Okay.
Or we can motion to approve or motion to deny. That's up to the commission tonight.
any thoughts on that from anybody else?
I think I would feel more comfortable with continuance also.
Okay.
Just to answer some of these questions that you've brought up. I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Well, I'll make the motion for the continuance on the thought that there will be some meeting that the developer, the applicant, will hold that would allow the community forum to talk about some of the issues and see if they can come to any sort of middle ground and feel more comfortable with it, at least prior to the next public hearing.
So I do have a motion by Mrs. Singer.
I'll second that motion.
I've got a second by Mr. Mifflin. So because I guess it's a public hearing, we'll still do roll call, I guess. So start with Mrs. Singer. This is a motion to continue to next month, which is December 9th.
Yeah, aye, yes.
Are we going to put any stipulations that?
Well, we would hope and ask that with this being a motion to continue, that, again, you can outreach to the neighbors. Neighbors can return a phone call or respond to your letters, Mr. Cato, and what? I hear you. Like
I
you
guess
said,
on the idea, sort of the requirement that there's some sort of coming together. Requirement as much as we can require. That would be the expectation, I guess, that we were setting.
Yeah, and if they don't show up next month, you can come, say, we offered a date, we offered a time, no one showed. And guess what? If you folks come out next month and are gonna argue this again, but you don't show up to the meeting to discuss with that, you know, as a commission, we almost would have no choice to approve it if you don't come to a meeting.
I live across the street, he's never mentioned this to me until I saw it at the festival.
Well, let's not argue. Let's not argue.
Y'all can talk about it.
Y'all could go in the hallway. Sir, no.
When are we going to get this notification?
That's up to you all.
Yeah, we're gonna let y'all work that out.
We never got the original letter.
The idea, the expectation would be there would be some meeting between now and the next hearing where you all would come together and discuss the issue.
Here's what I would recommend. Next month, if you come back December 9th, and I hope you do, and I hear that he didn't send you out a meeting notification, or he didn't make a phone call, or didn't send a letter out, then I've got I know what you're gonna say.
I have one question. I am available, and I will stop whatever I'm doing from 9 to 5, and I'll even stay late, from 9 to 5 during the week, and 9 to noon on Saturday morning. And if you see me there at any other time, stop.
Why should I have to come to you?
So we'll again, this is I'm gonna. Here's where we're at. We've got a motion on the floor by Mr. Singer, a second by Mr. Mifflin. I'm going to roll call to continue, and y'all need to go out in the hallway or outside and fight it out.
Not
between now
literally,
and
not
December
literally.
9th. Yeah, maybe outside. Judge Covington
Fight with
probably would be
birds,
happy if we had
yeah,
fights
yeah,
in the building.
I will say one thing, we might need a clarification provided by Charlie so that everybody understands the requirement for the notification, what that area is that's required, or Joe and them.
Charlie or
Because I
Joe,
think
do
some
you
people
wanna
might
answer
think
that
they
real
weren't in
quick?
compliance by notifying, but they probably sent it to those that were required. I think our request would be, in this case, they send it to the Oxford community or some public notice or something that they notify everyone in the Oxford community, so.
How are we supposed to know addresses and everything?
That's what you pay your attorney for. And you're paying them good money.
They've got a notification policy that we comply with.
Right. I understand.
People don't live in that notification area, so how do we know how to get a hold of them?
I'll let y'all deal with that between now and
The
December 9th.
PBA has all the names and addresses, and it's probably on the zoning map.
Right.
How are we gonna figure that out?
Charlie, I'll let my attorney answer that, Charlie.
If they don't show up to you, Pokey, then shame on them and we'll approve it. Okay?
All right, I think that's answered. So let me do
we
a
get
roll
to the
call
roll
to
call?
continue this, and then we're done. Ms. Singer, this is a vote to continue to next month, December 9th.
Aye, yes.
Yes, Mr. Mifflin?
Yes.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
No. I don't feel like putting it off.
Okay.
It'll help things a bit. Everything's gonna be the same.
Mr.
next time
Garrett?
it goes.
No.
Mr. Smith?
No. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Stephen Smith.
No.
And Dan Smith?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So it passes 5-3 to continue to next month, and hopefully there's an opportunity for y'all to discuss this, and maybe we can come to some kind of. Thank y'all.
Hopefully we would be hearing it.
Have a good evening. Thank y'all for your
I know
time.
that I'm gonna have to step off here.
Moving on to,
Nothing in the law.
moving on to the next application.
We're not required.
If we could,
I guess we're sitting.
If y'all could take your conversations out to the hallway, we appreciate that. Looks like we want a quick break, so we'll take 2 minutes if anybody needs to use the restroom. No, it's 8. Joe, would you change that clock?
I am going to have to step off.
Back, well, I'm gonna try to get us out of here in the next 30 minutes. All right, I hear you. If we can, well, I won't. All right.
Gotta get Joe back.
Yeah, well, we'll get started without him. Next on the agenda is PDP 2021-38 Four Seasons All Outdoors Preliminary Development Plan to construct a 5,000 square feet of building, floor area, and parking area located at 743 Lyle Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As he stated, this is a preliminary development plan to construct 5,000 additional square foot of building floor area as well as parking on the site at 743 Lyle Road. It is zoned A1 agricultural and has 27.384 acres in the tract, and access to it is off of Lyle Road. There is one variance or waiver included in this application, which is to reduce the canopy coverage to 5.62% of the total project site. This is an aerial from, I believe, 2018, 2019 of the project site. To the east of the property is I-75, and then to the west of the property is a railroad. And then it is all surrounded by agricultural land at this time, as illustrated by this zone map. The application is, or the proposed use is a conditional use in the A1 zoning district. And on last Thursday, November 4th, it was approved by the Scott County Board of Adjustment, subject to, I believe, 7 conditions, many of which are duplicates of ones that we see on the Planning Commission ones, with 2 additional ones that I can go over at a later point. So this is a permitted use by conditions that was, again, approved. This site was also subject to additional review by the Wellhead Protection Committee. This is a zoomed-in portion of the Royal Spring Aquifer that stretches from downtown Georgetown to downtown Lexington. And the site, or the area noted with the pink star, is the site location. It's obviously between Lyle Road and the railroad. Given its location, there are additional precautions that were recommended by the Wellhead Committee when this application was approved on Monday. So we are going pretty quickly through that. There are 5 conditions associated with that one that can be gone through at a later point upon requested. This is an aerial of the site. As you can see, it's pretty big, but the major amounts of the activity and development will be on the front side closest to Lyle Road. It does meet all building setbacks, access, and parking requirements, and given that it's kind of a unique use, the applicant was subject to kind of select the amount of parking that they were interested in doing. And so they requested 1 parking spot for the maximum amount of employees expected, and then staff requested 4 additional parking spots, which two of those parking spots are ADA accessible parking spots. Access is off of Lyle Road, off of an existing access that is adjacent to the Walnut Hill extension that goes underneath I-75. The 2 buildings noted as the existing buildings have been on the site, and the site is mostly interested in adding the containment vaults, parking, and mulch storage. It does meet all the requirements for those ones, and it does meet the landscape use buffers for interior landscape and vehicle use areas. There is the waiver that they are requesting, which is for minimum canopy requirements. They are retaining about 57,000 square foot of tree canopy, or 4% of the site area. And given the property size, a total canopy coverage required is 155,000 square foot of tree canopy, which staff believes would be inappropriate for the area given its really wide, expansive agricultural land. It would be an anomaly. So they requested a canopy requirement, obviously adhering to the interior land use area as well as the vehicle use area requirements, but just requesting a reduction in the total amount of land use coverage with tree canopy coverage from, I believe, 13% to 5.62%, which is more consistent with the surrounding area. There's appropriate buffering and kind of movement throughout the site. As I mentioned before, it received conditions from the Wellhead Protection Committee, but it was approved as part of that one. Staff does recommend approval of the preliminary development plan including the variance to reduce the tree canopy to 5.62% of the total project area, as well as is subject to 9 conditions. The first one is that they will adhere to all requirements of zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, followed by any reviews and projects will have to be reviewed by the Planning Commission and staff specifically. Stormwater management plans for the entire property as well as for the parking lot have been requested, and there's also some requirements on just the grading and proper construction procedural that is typical of any larger preliminary development plan. They shall also include such things such as species-specific landscape plans in compliance with buffers ordinance, and the preliminary development plan approval is valid for the 2 years subject to the sunset clause passed in 2014. I can quickly go over the Wellhead Committee ones just because it'll just kind of cover that quickly. There are 5 that the Wellhead Committee put forth on Monday. First of which is that the spill protection containment vaults volume shall be greater than the tank volume that would be placed within them. Second is that they would meet state standards for all chemical containment. Third is that they would submit a groundwater protection plan given its location on the aquifer. Fourth of which would be that they would not be using blasting practices for the instances of earthworks. And fifth would be the submittal of a stormwater management plan for the parking lot, given that that is where most of the concentrated development would be around. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Lease. Any questions?
The 2 properties on each side of it, are they both actively agricultural lands or people?
To our understanding, yes,
They are being farmed there?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We'll have the applicant up. So, or representation for the applicant.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Greg Smorstad. My address is 237 Burney Trail. That's in Nicholasville, Kentucky.
Are you with the engineering firm?
I am with Banks Engineering.
Thank you.
That's correct. Yep, representing the client. Well, we appreciate you hearing this plan tonight. We weren't sure we were going to make it with the Wellhead Committee meeting, but we snuck it in there on Monday, so we're glad we got that taken care of. We are in agreement with the conditions that they gave us and also the conditions that we received on the staff report here. And we would just like to ask for your approval.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Is it Smorstad?
Smorstad, correct.
Mr. Smorstad? Nope. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody in the audience want to speak in favor of this or against it, or questions, comments, concern? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I entertain a motion that we accept FSP 2021-39.
So the motion
Staff conditions.
by Mr. Garrett.
38, I'm sorry.
So I got a motion by Mr. Garrett.
I second.
And was that Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Second by Mr. Stone. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Passes, okay. Thank you. You can come up and sign with our attorney, the documents. And we'll move along to, holy cow, that was quick. BDP, we're doing, is it Crosswinds? Next one I got, okay. BDP 2021-41, there's one more before the cell tower. Crosswind Center preliminary development plan to construct 2 buildings, 2458 square foot and 3,669 square foot for restaurant use located at Crosswind Center Path.
Yes, thank you. I won't reiterate for everyone unless you absolutely want me to. This is an application to construct 2 restaurants at a property at Crosswind Center Path, currently zoned B2. To the northeast and south, it is zoned highway commercial, which is the same as the current zone, and to the west there is a residential use. The site acreage is 1.65 acres, and access would be on Crosswind Center Path, which has currently access off of Morgan Mill Road. I will show you here. So Morgan Mill Road is to the north. This is north facing, so the property is currently undeveloped and is just waiting for its forever occupier. To the south of it at 107 is Advanced Eye Care. It was approved, I believe, in the mid-2010s. And to the west is the residences from Morgan Mill, and then to the east is Cherry Blossom Way. And then north, I believe, is a auto shop and other fast food restaurants. This is just a zoning illustrating the higher density to the west and the property and those to the east being zone B2 highway commercial. A traffic study was not required due to the amount of trips generated, which is 100 trips across or per hour for each peak. It was not required, however, they did submit one. This is the total hours generated during peak trips for entering and exiting of the site. There would be more activity in the mornings, however, it still would be less than the typical expected one. We did determine that this does not include a write-in, write-out in the design plan that is available to you guys. It does show a write-in, write-out, and at this time, the development was kind of assuming worst-case scenario that KYTC would not grant that write-in, write-out access off of Cherry Blossom Way. There were no levels of service lower than C found. The only level of service C that was found was at Cherry Blossom Way at the Morgan Mill intersection, northbound and southbound specifically. This level is only noted in the PM peak times and does not change between the existing and the proposed scenarios presented by the traffic engineer. So it is reasonable to expect that it would not impact the level of service to a point where we would require some type of intervention. This is just a shot of kind of the placement of where everything is. This is in the submitted aerial and site plan. The buildings do meet the proper front, side, and rear yard setback requirements, as well as they do meet vehicle circulation. I just kind of illustrated here how the vehicles would be moving through the site. Brown routes are illustrated as 3 routes, and green routes are the queuing for a drive-through. Building 1, which is the one that is closest to advanced care on the south side, has a 12-car length drive-through that is 10 feet in width, and building 2 has a 6-car drive-through lane that is also 6 feet in width. The through routes around both of the drive-through lanes are one-way going towards Crosswind Center Path, kind of following that south and then east towards that road. And Crosswind Center Path is a 2-lane opposite direction road. It does meet our requirements for parking. Given that it is a restaurant development, it is 1 parking space per 150 square foot of floor area. Based off of the total area of just over 6,100 square feet, a minimum of 41 parking spots are required. However, the applicant is exceeding that volume and is proposing 70 parking spots with 4 ADA accessible parking spots, 2 of which will correspond to building 1 and 2 of which will correspond to building 2. And so it does meet that one. Internally, there are sidewalks. It's a little bit difficult to read the situation, but those marked in blue are existing ADA tactile spots. I just use that as just kind of a marker, as this is a designated area where if anyone's going to be moving through, it would be available to these individuals. And those in red are just proposed additions that staff may recommend at a later point. It's not something that is written into ordinance, just more of just a flow through the site. There is also along Morgan Mill and then along Cherry Blossom Way, the applicant is including a sidewalk that would lead kind of around and then up to the site with a crosswalk across the proposed, or hopeful right in, right out location and onto Cherry Blossom Way. So that would be paved and would be adequate, we believe, for transition, for movement kind of through and to the site. The site does meet our landscape and land use buffers ordinances, so but the minimum canopy requirements, interior landscaping, vehicle use areas, and perimeter requirements are all met. Given that it is a residential use opposite to it, it is important that we have effective and sufficient land use, and they have, or sufficient landscape placement, and you can see that there's a double row of hedges that would be installed to kind of protect those residences that are abutting the property. All things considered, staff does recommend approval of the preliminary development plan to construct the two restaurant buildings with floor area totaling 6,127 square feet with the following conditions of approval. The first three are typical of these types of things, so adhering to all zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, having any revisions returned to the Planning Commission staff and to the Planning Commission as required, and having a stormwater management plan through the site. The site, I did not mention, has permeable pavers on the outside ring of parking spots, so that would allow for a little bit of improved water management through the site, and would be a nice little addition. And then these are the other 6 conditions available, so supplying appropriate documentation, working with construction and grading, and having a construction meeting with the Planning Commission staff, including a photometric plan to show what the lighting placement is and the expectations for lighting, and complying with stormwater management and landscaping plans in the site. And then there are 2 years of the preliminary development plan validity subject to requirements of the sunset clause established in 2014. That's all I have.
Questions, comments, thoughts? I think Mr. Smith, Stephen has a question.
My only question was on the sidewalk goes all the way around and wraps, and then instead of continuing on down along Morgan Mill Road, it ends out, apparently ends out here towards the fronts.
There is existing sidewalk that covers about half of into that, we'll say about 20 feet from the entrance onto Crosswind Center. So this would be tacking onto the end of that and then continuing the rest of the way, and then continuing up in through into the Morgan Mill area.
So there would be connectivity?
Yes.
Good.
This is just a continuation. It's
Thank you.
difficult to
It looked
see.
like it just stops.
There's a lot going on that plan, so I can understand needing a little bit of clarification. I had
Any
to
other
go out of it
questions
anytime.
for Ms. Elise? Thank you. The applicant, want to come up and speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Chris Howard. I'm with Carmen in Lexington, Kentucky, here representing the applicant, One Holland. Elise did a good job, and I think pretty much hit everything. One thing I wanted to bring up, because it seems like it's always an issue with residential, for good reason, because we are proposing quite a bit of impervious area here. But one thing to note is that we are proposing underground detention system between Building 1 and Building 2. It's underneath that parking lot. And one thing to note is that, right now, I'm not sure how much of that water drains back towards the neighborhood, but I will say that in the future, from the double hedgerow, there's a curb line there that will stop any water from going towards the neighborhood. And all that water is directed towards the underground detention system. And then that water will eventually daylight into the right-of-way of Cherry Blossom and go underneath Cherry Blossom in the existing storm system. So that is the stormwater management plan that will be further developed. The other thing is the double row hedge adjacent to the neighborhood. That is a 6-foot tall hedge. And in addition to that, there's a grade change between this property and the residential property. That's, don't know right offhand, but I know it's at least probably 5 or 6 feet. 8 feet.
The
So that-
neighborhood's higher than the?
No, this is
the other way
higher,
around.
this is higher than the
Higher
neighborhood.
than-
So that, basically that's a 14-foot top to the top of hedge, elevation difference. So in terms of car lights, that's always a concern. Going through the parking lot, that should not be an issue given the grade change between the two properties. But we are in agreement with the 9 conditions and would request approval. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any question by the commission of Mr. Howard? And I know we have a couple folks that'll probably speak, so.
Hey, Mr. Howard, I don't have a question, I'd just like to make a comment. I'm really glad to see any infill jobs that we can get done or to fill these up instead of continue to spread out. And I've sold cement in the construction industry for 35 years. I'm tickled to death to see these permeable pavers.
Yeah.
Would like to see those used, more. If we could get those paving spots around the buildings, that would help with that runoff, in future. Use those as much as we can there. Or it doesn't have to be pavers. They can.
Yeah, I mean, they are we found them to be successful, but they are an expensive item.
Yeah.
And one item, I talked with the neighbors briefly, and one of the items that's going to come up is the fill that was placed here. I don't know when it was placed, but it was placed prior to this ownership. And certainly one of the things that is part of our due diligence for developing these buildings is a geotech report to determine what needs to be done to support these buildings in this parking lot. So that will be done.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, or at least one of the other there, the crosswind path, it goes on down to the eye care center, but it doesn't go on
It does
through
not.
to the newspaper office, does it? Okay.
This ends
At the eye care center? Okay, thank you.
Oh, and one other item, we have submitted our right-in, right-out encroachment permit to KYTC, but we have not had a response back from them yet, so.
Thank you.
I'll tell you that.
All right, so what we'll do now is, I know there's a few people from the public who'd like to speak, so come on up. I'm assuming y'all were sworn in, and if you weren't, just let us know and we'll swear you in.
We've lived there, I'm Jennifer Leto, and I live at 208 Old Mill Road, and I've been there for 28 years. And when, I'm gonna show y'all a picture, what he's talking about, the field dirt. I want y'all to see these pictures. This is what our house looked like when it was built. This right here is our house. This is the lot behind our house. You can pass it down. Our house is to the left, the farthest.
I was gonna say, which one are you up there? Maybe you can point that out.
The blue.
We're at 208. It's,
Seventh house?
204.
Second?
Yeah, I see 208.
like that one right there.
Yeah,
I think, yeah, that's it right there.
I see 208.
Straight up from
Gotcha,
the-
you're off the corner of the,
Yeah, right there. Yeah.
gotcha, okay. Thanks, Roy.
Okay, Doug Smith, a few years ago, we had this same meeting. He said, oh, I only put about 2 feet of dirt back there.
Yeah, swore on the oath. Got up there and swore.
Okay, and I'm gonna show
Nothing
you.
was done.
This is, I mean, this has been we've had water in our crawl space because of this, I believe. This is our, fence. We had a 6-foot privacy fence put up.
This is your house here, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the
Yep,
shed.
okay.
That's our privacy fence. You see that land right there? That's how much dirt Doug Smith put in that back box.
That's the 2 feet you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the 2
Oh, okay.
feet he's talking about.
How tall is the privacy fence?
6 foot,
2 foot over the fence.
okay? But he said, I only put 2 feet back there. And I know he's been trying to sell this for a while. Yes.
Just be passing the picture.
And, he had a drainage problem. So he decided to fix it. by draining into our yard. This is how Doug Smith decided to fix his drainage problem. And I know he's a big developer here, and he's been here forever, you know, and he says he does, you know, but this is not right. This is not right what he did in our backyard. I mean, I don't mind, you know, businesses, I'm all for, you know, expanding and everything, but not this way, not the way he did it. He's just trying to make.
You talking about putting that drain between the two buildings?
You'll see the.
Mr. Lito, you either have to come to the microphone or, yeah, because it's kind of, because we try to tape this and then it's got to be put on minutes. So, Mr. Howard, would you come back up here? And I do have some questions while she's showing us the pictures and stuff. So y'all are going to do the 6-foot hedge. You've told me that your property's higher than the neighbor's by about 8 foot, right? Does that sound right?
It's about 8 foot because.
Well, did you? I thought you gave me a number. Did you not say a number?
I'm going,
You just said it's higher than theirs.
it is higher.
Okay, so what I'll, okay, I'm just trying to, so Mrs. Lito, let me tell you this. This is actually probably going to be a good thing that they're developing this property, and I'll tell you why. Well, hang on, Mr. Lito, don't get upset at me. Let me finish. When you look at our conditions of approval, there's 9 of them. And one of them is the storm water and the drainage either has to remain the same, and in most cases, I'd say in almost all cases, and Ben can probably touch to this, you're going to get an improvement. When you develop a property that's just dirt right now, dirt and grass, there should be at that end there, dear. When it's just grass and dirt, you are going to get that runoff because it looks like it's been built up and it's gone down towards your property. But when they come out and develop this property, they're going to put in drainages. They're going to put in, 2 foot, whatever. And I'm not an engineer. I'm a retired banker.
He's sitting between those two buildings. He's done this. It don't drain there.
But I'm saying is once they develop it, they're responsible for making that drainage, especially to the neighbors, much, much better than it is. I've been on this planning and zoning commission for about 7 years now. And I don't know if I've ever in the 7 years I've been on here ever had anybody come back and said, you know what? They said they were going to drain it better and they didn't. Now I'm getting flooding. I would almost say just about every application I've ever heard, we've not had anybody, and there's been some people, I think Steve's been here longer than myself, that we've ever had somebody come back and said they didn't do what they were supposed to do. Now, are there people who cut corners? Absolutely. But I would hope that's a reputable firm. The companies that are coming in are reputable companies, I heard. There's rumor who's coming in. I think you probably know. So I would think they're going to do it right. I mean, and from what you have today, I would hope and think that it can't get any worse. So what you got to hope for is better. And I think with our staff, we've got some great folks. These 4 people here are wonderful. And then their staff that support them, the engineers, the tech reviews, everything that's being done, they're going to better your property and they're going to be a good neighbor. Canes, which is just a little further down the road, we had the same issue. The neighbors come out, they were upset, the property was filled in, they complained about lights, traffic, you name it. And honestly, I think those neighbors, at the end of the day, ended up being happier than they were before it got built.
Their lots down on that end were more level. And the problem, part of the problem is that, yeah, he's going to put hide it all.
Right.
But the difference between that hedgerow and our fence, who's going to take care of that?
If it's on their property, they better take care of it. There's an ordinance
Doug
that,
Smith hasn't done it in the last 15 years.
and Doug's selling it is my thought and guess. So, I mean, hopefully your new.
But there's other things besides that.
Well, let's hear it. I'm sorry to interrupt.
So, they tried to get the one way in, what is that called? In and out.
Right in, right out.
They couldn't do it the last time.
Well, he just said he applied for
Yeah,
it.
he applied for it, but the people that applied for it before, the state wouldn't let him do it. So if he can't get that, you have one way in and one way out. In our fire department, right across the street. So you have all that traffic, and I don't know if y'all been out to restaurants lately. Have you seen the line at Chick-fil-A? Have you seen the line at Cane's?
Right,
You know, Starbucks, just to get in and out.
right.
So I'm gonna go in, I need to go back out. How am I gonna get out of my house when you got 2 drive-throughs there and you got 20 cars sitting in both ones and there's one way in and one way out? And that road right there, this road right here, sometimes you have to sit at that light for 3 to 5 minutes before it will change so you can turn left. There's no turning lane, light for me to go left. So sometimes, if you're not lucky, you're gonna sit there because of the traffic just to get into our neighborhood, you know? So we have that problem. And, I mean, you have the noise, you have the lights, you have, the dumpsters, the noise that the dumpsters make. People look into your backyard, you know, and then like the Success Road, which is right here, there's a used car lot there. Well, you see those cars sitting on that right there? Sometimes you can only get one car down through there. So if Cane's is backed up from both ways, you can't get through there. You know, so I mean, we're talking about a lot of traffic. I know they say there's not going to be that much, but right now, like when we came down here, Arby's was backed out onto, what is that, 460?
Really?
They were backed out onto 460. Wow. So you're talking about a lot of traffic. You have no people that want to work right now. And they're only going to be drive-throughs. Most of the businesses are still doing drive-through only, not sit-down restaurant. If it was a sit-down restaurant, that might be different. You know, but you're talking about drive-throughs all the time. So, I mean, I just don't understand with all the places, all the open spots, all the open buildings, why at this point in time, they need to build 2 restaurants right there in this, what is it, environment, this stage of where we're at in the COVID and everything. I mean, it's not something, Dunkin' Donuts and another Skyline Chili, you know?
What would you want there?
What do I want there? I'd rather.
Because it's zone business, so it could be, what would you want there?
It used to not be zoned for restaurants.
Well, I mean, it's currently zoned B2. We're not changing the zoning, so it's been B2 for, I don't have the
I
record,
would have
but
rather
Joe.
had Texas
How long?
Roadhouse there.
So it's been zone business for 20 years. What would you like there, Mrs. Leto?
Yeah.
What would you like there?
I like another advanced eye center.
Well, I mean, you're not going to put
One that's not going to be impacting our neighborhood of getting in and out. I mean,
But I mean, what would you want to put there that would not impact traffic? Because
Another ice.
you can't have another eye center next to it. I mean, it's like
Well,
putting
you
a
know,
McDonald's next to a McDonald's, ma'am.
That's
It's
what I'm
not going to
talking
happen.
about. I mean, you got one way in and one way out. I don't think it should be, anything should be approved until they have another entrance to go in there.
We do have, I mean, we do, again, I've been on this commission almost 7 years. We try to do what's best for the community. A lot of these roads are state roads.
Yes.
Cherry Blossom's a state road, so we don't have control over how wide it gets. Same with, we can ask a right-in and a right-out only. That's not up to me or this commission to approve. That's the state that approves that.
Well, I mean, even if they do put a in and out there,
The problem is, you know, and we hear this a lot. Traffic connector road's one of the worst. Over by Starbucks and Kentucky
Yes.
Bank, now Stockyard Bank.
That's why y'all had to
And
put
that
the-
thing's been a nightmare forever, and everybody comes out and says, we don't want this because it's more traffic. I don't care where you build in Georgetown or Scott County, it's adding on more traffic. And,
yes, that's true.
and there's nothing we can do about it except for have a controlled, managed, logical growth. And we do our best up here as we can. I mean, we try to do our best.
So they are,
But they did have to reroute Applebee's entrance.
that little,
Well, yeah, what they did is, we tried to, we put a Band-Aid on a big wound, and we did those yellow posts that are up, but, I mean, again, I can't put another eye cares, it's like putting a McDonald's next to some McDonald's.
yeah, that's true.
It just doesn't happen. And yeah, but even the eye care, I've seen that's a pretty busy place.
Can I ask, yeah, mattress place, you put it right now.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's not,
Three in a
it's not
row.
blocking the roads like a lot of the drive-throughs are.
Let's try to keep it in order. Mr. Lito, if you want to come up and speak, come up and speak, but it can't be shouting from back there.
Can I ask a question?
And Mrs. Singer has a question.
Was there criteria that, that wasn't met before to get the approval for the in-out, that maybe the conditions have changed in the area and now it
That was
would?
before
Or
my
for the
time,
state,
I
I don't know what the criteria is that you have to meet for the state for the right in, right out.
Joe, do you want to answer that up by the microphone? Ben, you want to answer that at the microphone?
No, I can't.
Okay, all right. Well, go ahead, Mr. Lito,
I
state.
just want to say one thing, or maybe. We were told, after all that dirt was dumped, like 50 dump truck loads by an engineer, that you could not build on this land because it will not stabilize. Now, if you look at the newspaper company, it's way down here too. They built all that up where the eye doctor place is.
Who told you that?
Who told us what? An
You said
engineer.
you were told that you could.
It was a magistrate that worked here in our district years ago.
A magistrate in your district told
Yeah,
you
yeah.
that they could never build here?
They said.
See, the problem we have, and we
they
heard
said
this
you
last
shouldn't-
month.
They said you shouldn't build on that landfill. It's illegal.
We hear this almost every month, sir, and I don't mean to offend you, and if I do, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
that's all right, but that's what you gotta
We were
tell
told it'll never be built behind us, so there was an application last month. We were told that they'd
No,
never
I
build
wasn't told that it was never
between
gonna be
here and the
built,
creek.
because we know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I didn't say it was never going to be built. I said it shouldn't be built.
Oh, shouldn't be built.
Yeah.
I almost same thing,
No,
but yeah,
it ain't. Because there's laws and they're broken.
yeah. So, if you want to come speak, come back up here then.
Do you have to have a permit to, put that much dirt to build that grade up? Yeah. Did he have that?
A long time ago, I'm sure they got a permit.
Can you, is there any way you look it up and, because I went down to this place over here and I didn't get an answer from them when I went down there and asked.
When do you think it was done?
I can't imagine why
Mm.
it was bad when he.
Yeah, I mean, he's done it a few times. He put some dirt in there and then he'd put more in there and then that last, because I used to be able to go out there on the back and I keep that little area mowed behind my yard. And then it's like, well, I'm having a hard time.
Well, as he said,
And then this last time he'd go out, did y'all see pictures?
They'll have none.
Steve.
The OHP is?
They'll also be back.
Is that right, the OHP? Oh, ask Charlie. Go walk down to Charlie and ask him. I would think so, but ask him. All right, well, let's,
What happened to your 30 minutes?
yeah, no, I already called. I texted him, he got a ride from church home. So, all right, well, so what I would recommend you can do is public records, open records, you can request and see who did it and if you got a permit.
Yeah.
And the engineer might be able to talk, he can find out, he might be able
I
to.
just wish that y'all make sure that the traffic in that area, is not affected. Because right now, we get apartments coming through our, neighborhood.
Well, the problem is, as you know, and we all know in this room, we're the fastest growing county in the state of
Yes, I
Kentucky, ma'am,
understand
we're like a freight train. You can't stop a freight train on a dime.
But, I mean, just kind of like, make them use some of the buildings that they already have.
Yeah.
Have you talked to I'm assuming you've talked to Mr. Smith about your concerns?
Oh, we don't want to go there. I've talked to him for 20-something years over it, and it's just, this is wasting my time.
Whoops. Okay.
I do
Thank
agree
you.
with Chairman Solsky that I have to think that this being built there, it being sold and this being developed will improve your current condition in terms of what's happening right behind you right now.
That's what was my statement.
Yeah,
is-
that's a consistent result.
They'll
and
have
it
to
has
do a
been.
study to see if it's gonna be able to hold?
Absolutely, well,
Yeah,
and
yeah, they're not gonna build on something that's just gonna
Are we gonna
collapse.
get this, who do we go to get the?
Well, I was gonna say, Mr. Howard, if you wanna come up and kind of talk a little bit about the quality of what you're gonna build, how it's gonna affect or not affect the dirt and drainage, et cetera. And I know you've touched on it a little bit already.
Sure. I mean, one thing about drainage is that, you know, the thing to take into account, if you could switch back to the site plan, Elise, I'd really appreciate it. Yeah. So, you know, really, it doesn't matter where that detention basin is on the site, whether it's there because it fits there. All the water's going to be piped to that location. So it will take care of the drainage throughout the property. We have curbs up against all the pavement. There's not going to be anything from the developed portion of this property running off of the site. That just can't happen through the stormwater management. Traffic, I mean, we weren't required to do a traffic study, but we did a traffic study. We didn't change, I think there's maybe 1.6 second change from existing to proposed. So, you know, we haven't affected traffic negatively. I know any additional cars is negative. I live in Lexington and feel the same way, but from a traffic management standpoint, it meets those criteria. Geotech-wise, again, the developer of the property no longer owns the property. My client owns the property, so it is up to them to do their due diligence and will be done in the terms of a geotechnical report. Typically, what that entails is on a building this size, you'll pick up borings on 4 of the corners, 1 in the center for each of the buildings, and then we'll probably do 3 or 4 around the parking lot areas to see the quality of the soil, the compaction of the soil. And that'll probably be something that comes up. If it was fill dirt, then that's going to be something that the geotech is going to make a recommendation on how to stabilize that. And it could be a costly endeavor, but that's on my client.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Howard? And Ben, please, come on up.
Correction for the record, the traffic study was required. It was over 100 peak hour trips, morning and evening, so.
Okay, appreciate that.
They did it for the requirement.
And what I would offer to Mr. and Mrs. Lido is, as this project is being built, and you have concerns or issues, call Planning and Zoning Office and say, hey, you know, you're feeling or seeing that you're taking on more water. And ideally, yeah, things like that. So you can definitely, while it's happening, you can reach out to us and let us know, hey, your basement flooded. You know, if they're moving dirt and your basement floods, you know, I mean, it shouldn't.
This should be different. If they don't make a cut right there, if it's higher all the way across, all the water should be coming to those.
Right, to the drains.
To those detention basins.
Oh, well, yeah,
So.
they fix what Doug Smith did.
Right, and that's probably gonna have, what they're gonna have to do, so.
My property is winter, the backyard and everything, it's got ridiculous.
Yeah.
Risen.
And like I said, when you see development and improvements to property, the idea is it's supposed to better that property and the neighbor, and the surrounding neighbors, so you should hopefully be good and, all right, thank you. Any other questions, comment, Elise, you coming up?
This was something I failed to consider as part of the conditions of approval. Staff would recommend an addition of a 10th condition in which the developer would have to return if the right-in, right-out is not able to be, a permit is not able to be received by KYTC. So it would be an amendment to the plan, an amendment to the layout.
So if they did not get approved for the right-in, right-out, they'd have to come back to us?
Or some type of staff review or otherwise. It was
Staff review to confirm traffic
Yeah,
flow.
I think it's shown on the plan now. We're saying, if they can't get that approval, they would come back for an amendment.
Well, it'd have to be a different.
Well, wouldn't it be a minor amendment? It wouldn't have to come all the way to planning and zoning?
But wouldn't it have to come back anyway? If we approve a plan that's got right in, right out, and that's not approved by the state, they gotta come back because the plan they've got won't be buildable.
All right, let's
Yeah,
just add
that's
it
what
as,
that-
let's add it as condition 10 this
Yeah.
way. We may have to come back.
I did make a note of it, I just forgot to include
Thank
it
you,
on there,
Ms.
so I
Lees.
wanted
Well,
to
and you
correct
know
that.
what, myself and Charlie here were just talking, Walmart finally added that right in, right out off of Connector Road or Cherry Blossom, and I love it. I mean, when I remember to use it, but, because I have to come back, I guess it would be south on Cherry Blossom, and when I remember to use it, it's a great thing. So I hope the right in, right out comes, because I think that would help alleviate a lot of traffic off of the name of that road, sorry.
Morgan Mill.
Morgan Mill.
Boston. Oh, Morgan Mill.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not, we don't. That'd be city, state? No, who monitors? So they're the ones who adjust timing? Yeah, that would be the state.
So does the fire department operate that light if they need out?
Yeah, fire department.
Do they?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you, and I hate to keep making you come back up, but if you want to talk, come on back up, and so we can get you on the record it. All right. I know.
Like you saying that it's gotta come back because if people, that's only the in and out on.
Right in, right out
Yeah.
on
On-
Cherry Blossom.
Yeah, but on what side road would that be on? The right, on the right side.
It's at the very bottom of the picture,
So that's
left
gonna
hand.
be on this side. But
Correct.
Like, if I'm coming down through here and I wanna turn left into that road,
Yeah.
how am I
You
gonna?
can't, you
Turn
gotta,
left into Morgan Mill.
Right in, right out.
That's what I'm saying, is they need a turn light there.
no, it's not gonna happen, because it's too close to the other light. You can't have lights on a state road too close to each other.
That's why they put that little triangle in the middle of it, it's right in, right out only.
So
You can
yeah,
only-
if you were coming
It
from,
only
About
works for
turning
people that are,
I'm talking about coming from like Wendy's up that way.
yeah, so if you're coming from Wendy's, you're not gonna be allowed to turn into that.
No, she knows that. She's talking
I
about
can't,
turning on
I know I
Morgan
can't
Mill.
turn, I'm talking about turning left onto Morgan Mill.
Right.
Oh, don't you have a?
No.
Just you have a green light only, no
Yeah.
arrows?
So you just
Then
have
you'd
to wait.
Well,
You'd
it's
have
not
to
the
reach out to the state to request an arrow.
I'm not gonna be there that long anyway, so
Yeah.
we don't really have.
All right,
no,
well, thank you.
actually,
Yeah, exactly.
Then this whole thing doesn't matter.
All right, if there's no other questions, anybody else in the audience have any comments, questions?
I just had a comment, if this additional traffic, if these restaurants go in, it may force the issue.
Exactly.
And you might get an improvement because the state will probably make improvements in order to,
No, I'm not asking that. That's the question I'm gonna ask. Okay.
it's bad.
But I'll do my best.
I think, oh,
Scott County's grown so much over the last, I've been here, 33 years. I've been living in that house 27. But it's grown so much, and and that's the reason I moved there was because I worked at Toyota. I didn't want to fight traffic to go into work. It'd take me 5 minutes to get to work.
Yeah.
But in the afternoons and stuff, and then you got people going to the restaurants, and that light right there, really, that light right there, I've sat there for 5 minutes before.
I can believe it.
So, you're running people through the drive-throughs and coming out that way.
Yep.
You're talking about a lot of traffic there.
and it's not gonna probably get less, it'll probably get more.
Yeah,
'cause-
it's gonna get more because
Well,
it's
we keep
building.
growing.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Any other comments, questions by anybody? Mr. Perkins, can you keep it down?
Sorry, sir, I'm just getting.
All right, if not, we'll entertain a
I'm trying to keep
motion.
them awake over here.
Any other comments, questions by commission? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I hate to add more traffic to the Cherry Blossom, but I think this is already Zone B2, and I would make the motion that we approve
Got a motion by,
PDP 2021-41.
and with the 10 conditions, the additional condition Ms. Lees had with
Yes,
the
the
right
10,
in, right out,
the
that
10.
they would have to come back. So I've got a motion by Steve Smith.
Second.
I got a second by Mr. Stone. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Applicant can go over there and sign documentation. Thank you all. Next on the agenda is PDP 2021-43 Mallard Point Wireless Facility Preliminary Development Plan for a 195-foot wireless communication tower with a 4-foot lightning arrestor located on 10,000 square foot Lease area zoned A1 located at 1863 Burton Pike. This is a public hearing, so we'll open it up as a public hearing. Sorry, Mr. Pike, that you'll have to wait so long. There's but there's pros and cons to waiting so long. Go ahead, Joe.
All right, I'll keep it brief because I know Mr. Pike has a presentation. This is a request for a cell tower approval northwest of Mallard Point on Burton Pike at 863 Burton Pike. This is the site here. It's, I don't know if it's viewable from Mallard Point, but it's definitely viewable from Burton Pike. It is a request for a 195-foot tall monopole tower with a 5-foot or 4-foot lightning arrestor for a total of 199 foot tall. We have a complete uniform application, and it did meet all of our requirements, so it was complete. The tower is going to go on a 10,000 square foot lease area in the middle of the farm, meets all our setback requirements. I think the only comments we had in the application is that the entrance is going to be a new entrance. It's an area that shows as floodplain in our floodplain map, so they will have to get a KYTC permit for the entrance and meet any requirements of our floodplain ordinance for any construction in the floodplain. The other issue that came up at TRC, and this is the image of the tower itself. The only other issue that came up at TRC is there's a water main along the front of the property, and Georgetown Municipal Water was concerned about cover over that they maintain cover over that water main. So I've added an additional condition that they get the sign off on the construction plans for the driveway entrance from Georgetown Municipal Water. So we are recommending approval as the application is complete with our standard conditions, and then a couple extra conditions. One, that they get sign off from Georgetown Municipal Water and Sewer on the driveway entrance, and that they get the floodplain, and meet any requirements of the floodplain ordinance, and get KYTC sign off on the entrance, all before final development plan approval. So that's all I had. If you had any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll leave time for Mr. Pike.
Any questions for Mr. Kane by the commission? Thank you, Joe.
All right.
Mr. Pike, the floor is yours.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to appear before you again. For the recorded record, my name is David Pike. I'm the principal with Pike Legal Group, PLLC, P.O. Box 369, Shepherdsville, Kentucky. There's been quite the buildup from Mr. Pike's lengthy presentation this evening. Of course, it's always my assumption that everyone would love to hear me talk for an extended period of time. However, due to the lateness of the evening and due to the fact that this is largely an empty room, which in my line of work is a pleasure to behold, I'll indicate that there's one nice lady here who has a question that I know I can dispose of like that. She is not an opponent. Would it be possible for the chair to inquire whether there are any other opponents here, since that may fundamentally alter the length of this endeavor?
So you have a question or some comments or questions? Oh, so you're the, okay. And,
Okay.
And your husband, I'm assuming? Oh, you're for it? Okay.
Okay.
So
Well-
they're for it, it sounds like.
So
Against it, he's for it. And then are you here for this?
Okay. Well, it sounds like I probably need to do my presentation. I'll try to be expeditious in connection with it then. I did, however, make an effort.
Let's,
What is the question?
hang on, I was gonna say,
What if they ask the questions and then you could adapt your presentation to
based
get
on their
their
question.
question?
That's a great point.
I'll be glad to sit down with style and stand up again after you've
If you don't mind, Mr. Pike, have a seat, take a few notes. We'll let the people come up and ask their questions briefly, and then you can condense your presentation based on their questions. So come on up and state your name and address and your question, and then what we'll do is Mr. Pike will do his presentation, hopefully to answer all your questions.
Got it.
Can you pull the microphone down?
Yeah, there you go. So
I'm
we'll
short
get-
like me.
Elizabeth Goebel, 265 Wright Lane, Georgetown. I'm here to oppose this. I have to. I have a business. I'm horseback riding stables. This is going right at the back of my property where we have trails, and it's our business is horseback riding, and we have pristine wilderness and beautiful country to ride in. And this big tower is going to go right on the back of the property where there's a lookout where we take pictures, and we're going to have to cut all that off and keep our, we won't be able to use that part of our property anymore. Of course, if you back up a little bit, you're still going to see the big tower because it's directly behind us. So that's why I'm really against this tower being there. I understand it's AT&T. It's probably not going to help one person to go like it's not good, but I am been in Scott County, built that business up since 1999. You guys approved a subdivision go to the north side of us, so now we had to cut those trails back, and now we're getting smaller and smaller, and I can't afford to move somewhere else, and that's what I had to say about it.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Could I ask you one thing?
Sure.
Do you swear the statement you just made is the truth to the best of your information?
Absolutely. I was here earlier, too.
Oh, you did earlier?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I didn't see you signed up, so.
Oh, okay.
Or, never mind, now you're good. Thank
Okay.
Thank you, appreciate it. Ma'am, do you want to come up and speak as well, or?
Goebel, you're there.
What?
Oh, okay.
My name is Christy Depp, and I live at 1736 Burton Pike, right down the road from the cell tower. I don't have an opposition to it. I think it's great. We have horrible service. I mean, that's
There you
great. I spoke with Mr. Pike during the break, and he did answer one of the questions I have, but for your information, so that you guys have it, I asked if AT&T was going to allow other businesses to be on their tower, or if they were going to have a monopoly on the area, to which he said legally they have to allow other people to be on the tower. I think he said 3 spots were on the tower. Is that correct, Mr. Pike? 3? 4. 4 spots were on the tower. Okay, so that would set that. How soon are they going to build the tower?
I'll let him answer that.
How soon will we have better cell service because of the tower? So that was pretty much. And where on the property is it going to be? Like, as opposed to your big black barn, where?
So we'll let him come up after you
Yeah,
ask all
so
your
like
questions. He'll
exactly.
come up and answer them for you.
Yeah, because I didn't have that question before, but now I'm wondering, am I going to see it from my property?
Okay.
Which,
Face the barns to the top of the hill. You'll see a white sign. That's where the tower's going.
well, I can see the white sign, but this tower's going to be really tall, so.
If you look on top of that hill, you'll see.
On top of the hill? Okay, I've only seen it from the road. And
All right.
I don't know what light pollution cell towers cause. I'm thinking none.
He'll address that
But,
too.
so that would be the only other questions I have. I think it's great, so.
He'll address
Not
that.
opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Did anybody else want to come up and ask a few questions so we can, again, Mr. Pike can answer hopefully all of them?
I have another question,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Could you repeat your name again for the record?
Elizabeth Goebel, 265 Wright Lane. Does property depreciate around cell towers? Because that was another concern. Will all the neighbors, where their property value depreciate? And I know I'm going to lose money for my business, of course, with the tower going up, but I wonder, will the land depreciate also?
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? You what? You have another question you want? Sure, come on up. And then the gentleman, either of you want to come up or no, not necessarily? You're here for moral support? I hear you.
Yeah, did you have a question? No. I mean, I don't know that I can directly answer your question, but living there and dealing with the cell service that we have, I can only guess that it would improve the land because we don't have signal.
Really? Yeah, thank you.
It's a dead spot down through there.
So
Is there
there's
really?
like, I live in like the dead zone, so, yeah.
All right, Mr. Pike, I think the floor is all yours. I don't think anybody else is there to speak, so.
And again, I'm here at the pleasure of the commission. I have a full PowerPoint presentation that deals with all the intricacies of this proposal as well as the laws. Now, for those of you who've been on the commission a while, you obviously understand that these applications legally are completely different from any other type of case that you consider, because they're governed by an extended range of both federal and state laws that are unique to cell towers, because they're governed by the Federal Telecommunications Act. Based on that, there are a variety of restrictions regarding what the commission can and cannot consider. Naturally, you should defer to the opinion of your own legal counsel. And in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to tell you what I think the answer is to this, and you can turn to him and see whether or not I'm full of it or not, at least from his perspective.
He is full of it, but he's probably also right about the law.
Probably. Okay. So what I would propose to do is to give my responses to the questions that have been given, and then if the commission feels that it's appropriate, I will be more than glad to launch into my full presentation. But that'll be up to you, ladies and gentlemen. Does that seem like an appropriate approach, Mr. Chairman?
Wonderful, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so first let's kind of talk with aesthetic-related issues. It is well settled law in the Sixth Circuit that this Planning Commission cannot consider aesthetics, and it cannot serve as a basis for a cell tower disapproval. And the reason for that is has been stated very eloquently in prior U.S. Circuit Court decisions by indicating that otherwise there would be no wireless communications, since everyone would have an opinion regarding whether or not something looked good or not. Of course, this is also a licensed public utility, and as a result has a right to deploy service in connection with not only its FCC license, but its registration with the Kentucky Public Service Commission. So in the final analysis, whether the tower looks good or not is clearly in the eye of the beholder, but regardless cannot be considered by this commission legally. Now, the second thing I'd like to kind of talk about is let's put this in perspective. And part of that perspective is take a look at the setbacks that we have been able to achieve with this siting. That's not by accident. They vary from a low of 507 feet to the next property line to a high of 880 feet, with the nearest residential structure that is not owned by the applicant on the tract being over 1,300 feet away. Now, this tower is one of the 3 shortest towers in the entire county, with the average height being significantly higher than this one. It is specifically configured to be 195 feet tall with a 4-foot lightning arrestor, which means it does not have to be lit under FAA or Kentucky Airport Zoning Commission guidance, and will not be lit unless that was ever required in the future by those federal requirements. And I'll be more than glad to stipulate that as part of this proceeding. I think it's also a very good question, how soon? And it is our hope very soon, but we can't budget it until we have your approval, and we can't take that for granted.
Bless you.
I will note that every other governmental approval that is required for this tower has already been obtained. It would be our expectation that this construction would be done in the next year. Now, a key issue that was asked, and I want to make sure I restate it so that it's not just a question of me telling you privately. This tower is pre-configured to accommodate at least 4 wireless carriers. AT&T will be one of those carriers. But the plans call for not only ground compound configuration, but for a tower that is over-engineered to be able to accommodate structurally 3 more wireless carriers in addition to this one. Now, although these wireless companies compete against each other fiercely, and make no mistake about that, when it comes to co-location, that battle has been settled. Because we have existing master lease agreements with all of the other FCC license holders in this market that obligate us to provide them with space on our tower at predetermined rates. And of course, the reason that that has evolved is if we were to try to stiff another carrier for this tower, they would be in a position to do the same thing to us tomorrow elsewhere. I think the classic legal phrase is sauce for the goose applies here. So now, do we have direct interest now? No, because there is no tower there. But it has been our experience in chronically underserved areas like this section of this county with high population growth that once AT&T absorbs the cost associated with the construction of the new tower, we would expect additional co-locators to be seeking to locate on this tower. We will not know that, however, until it is operational. To answer your other question, as soon as those antennas are placed on the tower, it will be operational. It will also be operational with our FirstNet service, which is the new state-of-the-art emergency first responders access system that allows us to dedicate capacity in times of emergencies, either locally or regionally or on a national level, to first responders, so that they can always complete their calls and data transmission. Now, I think that deals with and of course, when it comes to real estate values, legally, it's our position as a public utility that cannot be considered by this commission. But even if it was, in our prior cases, I think you're familiar with the expert testimony that we've submitted indicating that is not the case, and that in fact, in chronically underserved areas, you can see real estate appreciation since people can finally use their phones. Now, that's my response to the questions that were given. I have a full presentation, and I here again at the sufferance of the commission.
I think the benefit of going last is I personally think we don't mind hearing a condensed version based on that it's almost 9:30.
That was, there's a spot for you at the UN as a diplomat, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, unless anybody else is opposed to that. Are we okay with hearing it?
I want to hear the whole thing.
Then in that case, there's a couple of housekeeping matters. First of all, I brought hearing distribution binders that included a copy of my PowerPoint. Instead of distributing all of them, I've provided one to council. I would like to have that included in the administrative record designated cumulatively as Hearing Exhibit 1. And I would also indicate that we accept the eminently reasonable stipulations that were proposed by staff earlier. As always, we are grateful for the staff's thorough review, especially when it leads to an unequivocal recommendation of approval.
Just glad you're not covering all the documents in those two boxes.
Okay. Anything else?
You're ready to go when you are, Mr.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, what'd you say?
No
I'm not
questions.
asking questions.
Did we, yes, it's still, well, you know what, seeing that we had no more comments, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Smith. And then I guess at this point, commission have discussion, and then I need a motion.
I'm very familiar with the lack of phone service down that area. I have a couple of friends down that way, and once they get home, they don't have any. They've got to stand on top of the house. They might be able to call. So I would think they would welcome this tower. Somebody might not be happy with looking at it.
Do y'all have internet service down there, Christy?
Shelby.
My parents have that. I wouldn't necessarily state it's strong service. Maybe this will help you. Yeah.
All right. Mr. Pike, what
Go ahead.
What size of coverage does this tower?
Actually, we provided as part of the application some coverage maps that depict that, if you'd like to take a look after the hearing, for both our high band and low band coverage, roughly a couple of miles.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for, well, the public hearing's closed, so What I'd probably do is ask Mr. Pike to go over there and answer that question. Commission, comments, concerns, thoughts? Otherwise, I need a vote, or a motion, I guess I should say, to approve or deny.
I'll make a
Because
motion.
if we deny, we know where that goes.
I'll make a motion for approval of PDP 2021-43 with the conditions listed in
So
the
I've
staff
got a
report.
motion by Mrs. Singer.
I'll second.
Was that Dan? I got a second by Dan Smith. Because it is a public hearing, we've got to do a roll call. So this is to approve PDP 2021-43. Roll call to approve. Mary Singer?
Yes.
James Stone?
Yes.
Steve Smith?
Yes.
Dan Smith?
Yes.
David Vest?
Yes.
Dewan Garrett?
Yes.
Charlie Mifflin?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Mr. Pike.
Thank you all for your patience.
Yes.
Clients and myself, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see a professional operation and, rolling on.
Tired is the word you should use. The only other thing I think we see on the agenda, because it is almost 9:30, is short-term rental ordinance. We did cover that in a workshop. Were there any thoughts, concerns, or deviations from what we heard on Monday? Or did you want to cover it very briefly?
Yeah, I can cover it briefly. Also, we do have to have a public hearing on it, since we are recommending a change to the ordinance.
All right, so we might as well run through it then, even though, so I'll open it back up as a public hearing and go for it.
Thank you, and I will be brief. So there are some proposed changes to the zoning ordinance, and I'll cover those first. And then second, and more briefly, I'll go over the proposed short-term rental ordinance broadly, even though parts of it won't affect us, but I believe this is the public hearing for the zone change that the city council will be considering. So the parts that are going to affect the zoning ordinance are as follows. In section 2.1, there are some amendments to the definitions. You'll see here in the definition of family, a portion will be struck at the recommendation of the city attorney. As far as definitions being added, we are adding a definition of short-term rental. You can see it there. Generally, a short-term rental, I guess more commonly, you could think of Airbnb and VRBO. This is adding definitions just so we have a way to discuss in the ordinance what those are. We've also defined unhosted home sharing, basically when you rent out an entire house to somebody on a short-term basis. As far as I guess how the zoning ordinance handles it, we will be repurposing section 2.58. That was a section that previously dealt with group homes. That ordinance was repealed by city council, I think last year, or possibly the year before. So this short-term rentals will go in there. Basically, it stipulates they must be registered with the Revenue Commission, and then we establish a use table to show which zoning districts they'll be either allowed in by right or not permitted, and sort of under the condition. So remember, at Monday's workshop, we talked about sleeping rooms. That's sort of just when you rent out an individual room. So depending on how many sleeping rooms you're renting out, it may be prohibited, it may be permitted by right, it may be conditionally permitted. And then all of these districts that are shown here would allow you to do the unhosted home sharing, so renting out the whole home without any type of conditional use permit or anything like that. So these districts are the only ones that we list in the use table because these are the only districts that allow residential uses. The previous slide mentioned that any districts not mentioned in this table, short-term rentals are prohibited. So you can't have Airbnb in an industrial zone, basically.
Question I think I had on Monday, and I think
Yeah.
I speak maybe for most of the commission, is who is this really going to affect? This is not going to affect a Airbnb that has 1, 2, or even 3 bedrooms because, let's see, for a weekend stay, overnight stay, even a week stay.
Yeah.
It almost seems like this would go towards maybe a hotel that was converted to I don't know. I mean, what?
So, I mean, nothing, I guess nothing in the part that's going to into the zoning ordinance outside of the definitions, none of it changes how we handle Airbnb type
I guess what I'm asking is by changing this language in this ordinance, who is this ultimately going to affect, if anybody?
I
I'm
think,
seeing
I think,
Mr. Cornett raising his hand back there. Is it really
I think,
gonna?
I think it makes it easier. People have, it gives people a place in the zoning ordinance that they can look to and find answers when they ask the question, I have this property, I have this house, I want to do, rent it out on Airbnb. How do I do that? They can now find answers because we've defined short-term rentals and we've defined which zoning districts it's permitted by right and conditionally permitted. They don't necessarily have to go through, asking staff for an interpretation about whether or not it's allowed in certain districts.
So I see, like, I'm looking up there at certain zones, and I apologize, I need my glass. Well, I can read it. A1, A5, and R1A.
Yeah.
They're not, if you're sleeping 3 people or less, it's not permitted.
It's not people. Those are renting out individual rooms.
3 individual rooms. Well, how many Airbnbs have 3 or more bedrooms, or 3 or less?
Well, if you're renting out the whole house, that would be the renting column. It's permitted by right in all of those.
So then it wouldn't affect Mr. Cornett there in the back of the room.
It's fairly uncommon for somebody to say, I'm going to rent out, 2 different rooms to
Right.
2 separate parties.
Almost be like a flop house is what basically is, and we don't have, that I'm aware of.
That's only permitted in R2.
Exactly. But no, I mean, Charlie, I'm thinking about this is, we have housing, and I think there was one in Bradford at one time. It was like a halfway house where people, and I don't think they were necessarily renting, I think, well, they may have been, where there were several, like a group home. Whether it was mentally challenged, whether it was drug rehab, alcohol rehab. Do we have a lot of those here in the community that this would affect?
It would affect them if they were renting out those rooms for 30 days or less.
Right, so that's where I'm thinking is
Well,
that
the
might
whole
be
house was used for that.
That might be,
It would,
but that would be an unhosted home.
I think it depends on how they operate it.
So if they have a individual who's managing that home,
Yeah,
then
I mean,
that
if
would
they're,
not
if they're
be.
actually renting it out, then the rooms individually, this would apply. If it's let's say Company X purchases the house and they are housing people in there.
Or a nonprofit
as part of a program, or a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And they're housing people, there's part of that program. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, but
if
to
this would apply,
Mr.
because this
Singer's
is-
point, and I thought about that, a non-for-profit, so let's say Elizabeth Village, a gathering place, but they're not
But they're not
renting.
renters.
They're not renters,
Yeah,
so they're not paying a fee.
Yeah, this almost, the way it's defined, is strictly gonna be like an Airbnb or one of those vacation B and Bs.
It's, I mean, and if we go back, I mean, and we can read the definition, but if we look at the definition, like, it is specifically targeted to dwellings that are leased, rented, or otherwise assigned for tenancy.
But again, you said, go back one, slide.
To which one?
The
table?
there you go, that one. Every Airbnb in town that I'm aware of is an unhosted home. So with that being said, it's all permitted.
Yeah.
So there's no.
It's all permitted by right under the zoning ordinance. The main thrust of this is that the city is proposing changes as far as registration with other agencies. So this is the next part of it, is you will have to register with the Revenue Commission on an annual basis. You will have to make sure you're registered with the Tourism Commission so they can be collecting, the appropriate
So
taxes.
to Mr.
transit
Cornett's
taxes.
point, and I see him kind of bopping up and there and down, is ultimately what this is gonna do is it's gonna cost him a little more money. But so you already paid. This is not additional fees then to Mr. Cornett? This
That
is
I
just-
don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. These are under other agencies that I don't work with them on registering.
and my home, as an example, let me make sure I understand, 4 bedrooms. I rented out 3 of them individually, then, for less than 30 days, for 2 weeks. I would have to get this permit or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean,
But if I
depending
rented
on
out the
what,
whole house,
depending on
no
what
problem,
zoning district
right?
your property is in.
Okay.
This is just a zoning table.
Okay.
I just want to make sure, and I'm sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions. I just want
No.
to make sure what we're looking at, I understand.
Yeah.
Because I would hate to talk about and
Unintentionally.
vote on something that I'm really not sure how it's
Yeah.
affecting our community.
So as far as the zoning ordinance, the things that we administer, this table clarifies things. It doesn't change how we have dealt with these type uses in the past. The main thrust is that we are adding these definitions. The rest of what I'm going to talk about doesn't impact how the Planning Commission handles these. It really just handles how the community sort of registers, tracks them, and makes sure that they're safe. So there's the registration component, then it also establishes duties of the host, so safety requirements, fire extinguishers, carbon monoxide, things like that. You know, deals with signage so that we minimize the, I guess, sort of the disruption of neighborhoods, of existing neighborhoods.
The second, could I ask clarification on the second
yeah.
bullet point? No more than one contract at a time?
Yeah, that's something the city put in there. I'm not entirely sure what the intent is myself.
What it means?
Yeah, I assume they maybe don't want, you know, more than one contract on a certain property at a time. So they may not be in favor of allowing, you know, multiple sleeping rooms to be rented out at a single time.
That does make sense, because if you had 4 different rooms, you want to
Yeah.
rent 4 different.
2 rooms across the street, same building.
And yeah, and you have 2 separate contracts. So that does make sense, Matt.
Well, like I said, I don't know. That's not going to be a part that we enforce or really have anything to do with.
And so this is just short-term?
This is just short-term rentals.
Not long-term?
Yeah,
No.
30 days or less.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. They will, it also has, I guess, sort of the last 2 sections authorize the Revenue Commission Director to be able to obtain data from short-term rental advertisers such as Airbnb and VRBO so they can enforce the ordinance. And it also sets out penalties and I guess, potentially appeal procedures should there be violations or suspected violations. That's the very, very brief version of the ordinances before you, or the changes to the ordinances before you.
So this is about adjusting our zoning ordinance to match what the city's already passed?
No, they have not passed.
They have not, okay.
No, we're going to send this with a recommendation.
Yeah, we would hear this, we would have the public hearing, we would take public comment, and then make a recommendation.
It's not just the city, it's city and county.
City and county, is it?
City and county.
City and county?
So thank you, Matt, for your presentation. Anybody have questions of Matt? Comments? I'll open it up to general public if you
Good
want to
job,
speak.
Matt.
Mr. Cornett, you would like to speak? So state your name for the record and address.
Roy Cornett, live here, live out in Ironworks, got a bunch of stuff here in downtown. Full disclosure, I'm on the tourism board, have been for years. Tourism board gets funded by the hotel motel tax, which the Airbnb guys that are legal are paying. I've got 2 nice ones across the street that are doing very well. I would suggest, you know, Mark told me at lunch today that this was on it, I didn't know anything about it. And then Doc Sims called me. Said, hey, Roy, you need me to be looking into this. That's the reason I'm here tonight. I would suggest that what we ought to do is table this and let tourism invite all the people that got Airbnb units in town, review this and get their feedback, and then come back, spread it out. But just some questions I came up, I was talking to Joe about a while ago, just glancing through this thing. Number 1, says you got to get a license every year. Well, I've got a business license in Georgetown, it's Cornett and Associates. I got to get another, it's over my building. Do I have to get another license for this? And renew it every year? Okay.
Right, it's an annual registration.
Yeah.
No, so I'd entertain that motion if somebody would like a motion to, because I think we need to get more people here. We need to, everybody who maybe is involved or could be affected by this need to
Understand the
know
unintended
that they're coming,
consequences.
because by chance I bumped into Roy this afternoon and told him about it. Otherwise he wouldn't have known about it, and then Doc, I guess, found out about it.
Was now, this, oh, yeah. Like the downtown business district, zoning wise, Matt had on there, the zoning stuff was all residential. Anything outside of that, not allowed. Well, downtown business.
And Mr. Cornett, the one contract per, I don't understand that, and you said you didn't know what that meant.
But I understand what Matt said, is anything that's on business is not allowed.
Make a motion.
Well,
Make a
across
motion.
the street,
Get out of here.
my downtown business, I've got 2 units in there.
So I think we've got.
Per Mr. Cornett's request, I'll make a motion to continue it. That's the next month.
So I got a motion by Mr. Mifflin.
But what I suggest on that was.
I got a second.
We've got a tourism meeting next Wednesday, and we as tourism will invite all the Airbnb people to come in and have a voice. Yeah.
And Matt could probably get you a copy of everything and the changes.
And that motion,
So I got a motion by Mr. Mifflin?
Continue the public hearing, not
Yes,
just
thank
continue
you.
the matter, but continue.
And
the
I got a
public hearing.
second by Mrs. Singer, because it's a public hearing. I guess I need to do a roll call real quick. This is to
No, it doesn't need
continue?
to be.
No?
Since we're
All right, all in favor of, continuing this public hearing till
Aye.
next month, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. Anything else on the agenda? I think we're good, right, Joe?
FYI, I guess, to make
We're
sure we
just
all are
waiting for your
aware.
hammer.
Yes, meeting adjourned.
Excellent.
Joe, this is just FYI. to make